Welcome to J is for Justice podcast. If live breaking news and following true crime is your thing, then please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like what you see in my videos, please consider giving them a thumbs up. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hopefully I'm not muted. No, I'm not. Hey, Mike Sanders says, woo, I see that Daybell, and I think I need a love button, not a like button. I'm just kidding. Hey, Mike Sander. Hello, Potato. And Casey Marie, Bruno Jones. One-Eyed Flo coming in for some chin action. Karchi. And Mark Calvin Klein. Welcome in, guys. Let me get our chat highlighted up here so we can see what y'all have to say during this stream. We're going to be going into days 13 and 14 of the Chad Daybell trial. So today on the 13th day of trial, we had FBI cast and a cousin of Tammy Daybell. And then on day 14, we have the medical examiner that did the autopsy on Tammy. And also a couple neighbors of Chad and a coworker of Tammy. I think that's about it. And then today they had actually Heather Daybell on the stand, Kay Woodcock. Chad's mother testified today, and we'll get into that in our next update. It wasn't really as juicy as you'd think, though. I was like, oh, Daybell's mom, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't watch all of it, though. So that's what we're going to get. That's what we're going to get into. So as you can see, Chad is taking his seat. Hi, Miss Robin. Hey, Lisa and Helen. Hey, Miss Beautiful Auntie Cheryl. Hey, Moo Brews and Julie. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Hit the love button. Pomegranate oranges. Hello, Amy. Amy, we could start. Okay, so Amy is our official... besides me, of course, our official smartass commentary. All right, Amy Capel. Now we can begin. Let's start with day 13. Hit that like button, you guys. Day 13, Chad Daybell. And this is going to be the cross-examination of the FBI cast.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, he says, let me get a drink. Hi, Mark. Good to see you, Mark Calvin Klein. Yes, he chose his seat, Aunt Flo. Aunt Flo. Mark Klein, look. Da, 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 da. It's a play button. Look at him. I never realized that my chin was so damn large. True crime of the other stuff.
Good morning, Agent.
Good morning, sir.
Before we get into some of my preliminary questions, I actually just want to skirt ahead a little bit to and sort of go out of order. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. I noticed when I got your report, I reviewed your report. And what's the significance of October 9th? Do you recall?
Sure. So October 9th, I believe, was associated with a report from Tammy Daybell of potentially having someone attempt to assault her.
Right. That was whoever's interpretation of paintball gun potentially was involved, correct?
That's what the report indicated.
But there was an interaction with Tammy Daybell on that date, correct? That's what you recall?
Yes, there was a report indicating there was an action that took place on that day.
Now, I read your report, and Do you recall the approximate time that the report stemmed from the 911 call on Tammy Daybell?
I don't.
Would it be possible that it was about 9:30 to 10 o'clock? Does that refresh your recollection?
I know it was in the evening hours, but specific time I don't.
Now, based on your analysis of Alex Cox's phone, and I just want you to touch on your evaluation of that October 9th time. Can you tell me what Alex Cox's phone and where it was binging on October 9th between approximately 5:30 and 10:30 at night?
Did you say binging? I'm
Well,
sorry.
where it was locating, where it was showing location data.
I need to look at my report to
Do you have a
refresh
copy of
my
the report?
recollection. I don't.
Did you say binging? Prior is a trip. If you're not paying attention, you just may miss it with him. He doesn't know the terminology, or he just plays dumb, but he acts like a boomer who has no clue about technology at all. Binging. Bing bong.
The approximate time that the report stemmed from the 911 call on Tammy Daybell?
Kina.
I don't.
Would it be possible that it was about 9:30 to 10 o'clock? Does that refresh your recollection?
I know it was in the evening hours, but specific time I don't.
Now, based on your analysis of Alex Cox's phone, and I just want you to touch on your evaluation of that October 9th time. Can you tell me what Alex Cox's phone and where it was binging on October 9th between approximately 5:30 and 10:30 at night?
Did you say binging? I'm
Well,
sorry.
where it was locating, where it was showing location data.
I need to look at my report to
Do you have a
refresh
copy of
my
the report?
recollection. I don't.
This is FBI cast. He's like, did you say binging?
Judge, could I publish this?
I'm not sure. Are we on the exhibit 156?
We're on exhibit 156, page 80.
Okay.
Bing bong. Oh, shit. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Hi, Sin. Good to see you. Hi, Jess.
Are you able to see that, Agent?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Homer J. Maximus, and I'm looking at October 9th. Why don't you read that time for me?
Yeah, so this is October the 9th between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m., showing Google location history associated with Alex Cox's device.
Okay, and that's on October 9th, is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
And that was the date that allegedly there was some sort of an incident on Tammy Daybell's property between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, is that correct?
My understanding was the evening hours, but
Okay.
I think that would encompass it.
So
Mr.
according to
Pryor,
this,
I need to have you talking to the microphone to keep our record for FTR.
I'm sorry, Judge, and according to your data, it appears that the phone associated with Alex Cox from the Homer J. Maximus account puts Alex Cox where between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m.?
So it puts the device at Alex Cox's residence.
It
Your
puts-
Honor, may I ask for and I apologize to interrupt, but may I ask for just a brief sidebar?
They always do this. Oh, Jesus. Let's see how brief it is. Chad's chin. So, random fun fact. Pryor brings Chad's chin, his suits for court every day. Nate Eaton was outside of the courthouse one day, real early, and here come Pryor with Chad's dry cleaning in hand. You don't like Chad's flat top, Amy? Bing bong. He's going to open that laptop in a second. He's looking a little fidgety. Okay, here they come. Pryor waddles back. Chin stick. It's not chapstick, it's chin stick. That's so funny. Binging. Did you say
All right, you can
binging?
continue with cross, Mr. Pryor.
Bing.
So again, officer, and the display's not up anymore, I guess. We're looking at 5:16 p.m. to
Hold on.
11.
Let's get that up. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Pryor. We'll Make
okay.
sure we got the, okay.
So Alex Cox's phone, and tell me, what is the proper term? It's showing a location data on October 9th between 5:16 p.m. and 11:53 p.m. Is that what that reads?
Yes, correct.
And that's on October 9th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, and we can take that down, Judge.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
And Judge, one more time on page 104.
You want to publish that page?
Yes.
Oh yeah, no
All right,
doubt.
Madam Clerk, we'll publish the exhibit again, please.
2 for ones. Can you imagine having to pick
So
up Chad,
other than the
having
references
to pick up his dry cleaning?
September 9th and September 23rd, correct? There were 5 other times that you put Alex Cox at or near the Chad Daybell property. Is that correct?
So there were 5 other occasions where a device associated with Alex Cox reported.
Alex Cox's device.
Correct.
And those would have been August 7th.
Correct.
And that was for about 11 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
And then August 24th for 8 minutes.
Yes, sir.
September 6th, 3 days before the 9th, and he was there for about 10 minutes, right?
9 minutes, sir.
9 minutes. I'm sorry. My math is probably not as good as yours. September 25th, 2 days after the 23rd, he was there for 18 minutes, right?
Yeah, and I'll back up. Your math is actually better than mine because that would have been 11 minutes.
11
on
minutes.
September
We're both
6th.
wrong.
Indeed.
We're both.
And then October 15th. So now, when I read your report, your contact was limited to 100 meters. Is that correct?
Yeah, my analysis was based on margins of error that were less, 100 meters or less,
300 feet.
approximately.
So that does not include if Alex Cox drove by a number of times, right?
It could, because if that device had that 100 meters or less and it went by on the street beside the residence, it would have been included in there.
Okay. And but if he was he was more than 100 meters away, it doesn't include these figures aren't included in that. Is that correct?
So if the device was more than 100 meters in error, then it wouldn't include it.
Right.
So as long as that 100 meters, that circle that I showed earlier with yellow, as long as it touched the Daybell property, that's when it was included.
Okay. And Judge, we can take this one down.
Get it? True crime.
Now, I want to go back to just to clarify a couple of things in terms of explanations. Go ahead. I'll wait for you.
Sure, you're good.
Oh, do you need some water?
You're good.
What's the difference between a tower and a cell site?
This
So if
reminded
you get
me
into
of
the
Idaho.
specifics,
Listen
the cell
carefully.
site in the industry is more or less used for the tower and sector, whereas the tower would just include the tower itself.
Okay. So your presentation deals with tower coverage. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the tower is basically where the antenna is on the top of whatever the structure is. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. A cell site is how they actually create the coverage. Is that fair?
So if you're looking at the cell site, the specific antenna that are on top of the tower and the direction that they face, that's usually termed to be the cell site of what it provides coverage for.
So we're not really talking about tower coverage. We're talking about cell site coverage, aren't we?
The tower coverage would include all the sectors, whereas a cell site would be specific to a sector.
Okay. Okay. And the importance of how an antenna is located plays into how these figures are calculated. Would that be fair?
Correct.
So for instance, if an antenna is a little pointed down or pointed up, that will manipulate and have an impact on what the readings that you're getting. Would you agree with that?
It would impact the coverage based on which direction antennas are facing.
And when we're talking about coverage, we're talking about with what you're talking about with coverage, we're talking about where an area of a cell phone company is providing service. Would that be fair?
Correct.
You never use these coverage towers to actually locate where a phone is. Isn't that true?
No, I definitely would use coverage maps to locate where a phone is and
Okay.
have in the past.
So when did you do the drive test? On what day?
Believe it was the week of June 15th, and it was across multiple days of 2020.
Okay. So in 2019, particularly in September, that was a significant amount of time later, correct?
It's about 9 months after.
Right. And we have no assurance that the antennas or the coverage or the engineers made any adjustments or changes, do we?
We do. So I looked at the tower lists that were provided from AT&T and Verizon for
Okay.
September of 2019. And then I compared those with the tower lists from June of 2020. And I didn't see anything in any of the towers used in this report that would significantly impact what the coverage would have been or changed.
Significantly impact?
Correct.
So there were changes?
There were no changes in direction of which way sectors were pointed. There was changes in what's called the beam width, and they were off by about 5 degrees, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With drive testing, you still can't provide an exact location of where a device is, can you?
Correct. Drive testing is basically going to show you a coverage area of where a phone could be.
Where a phone could be, right?
Correct.
It doesn't show where the phone is, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned this a couple of times with the prosecuting attorney. You mentioned the term gladiator forensics.
Yes, sir.
Now, the way I understand gladiator forensics is that's a tool used by the FBI.
They're a company, and they provide a tool that's used by the FBI.
But that
Welcome,
company
Amy.
will not provide their tools to anybody but the FBI. Is that fair?
No, my understanding is they will only provide or sell their equipment to law enforcement. I don't think
the
it's
government.
specific to the FBI.
To the government.
Correct.
So an independent person can't get a hold of this information from gladiator forensics and do their own analysis of what your data is showing. Is that right?
No, the information, most definitely. That's whenever it records the information as a part of the drive test, we have a raw data file that shows all of the different measurements and the latitude, longitude of the location of where the device was when it took those measurements.
Well, you're providing the data, but the actual tool and the program itself is not available to anybody unless you're within the government. Isn't that true?
I believe their specific company only sells to law enforcement.
So you folks have the program. You folks have the way to input the data into your program that's only the government has access to. Is that right?
So we have a tool that allows access to it, but Gladiator doesn't make the only tool that would provide that same information.
Okay, but the tool that the FBI is using is not available to the public at large. Is that right?
That's correct.
Of course not. And they don't like telling us how.
To your
what
knowledge,
tools
has
they
anybody
use.
ever done any independent testing outside government to prove that this tool that you're using is working properly?
Yeah, so we actually send that device off to the company that manufactures the sensors, Rhodes and Swartz, and they calibrate that system.
But then again, that's not available to the average citizen out there, correct?
It is. The sensors by Rhodes and Swartz are sold to the general public.
But the tools by Gladiator Forensics are not.
So when you say tools, basically like the components of the device, yes, they are. But as packaged by Gladiator, that is not available to the public.
Okay. So once again, if someone wants to verify that the tools that you folks are being sold by Gladiator Forensics were working properly or that there's no issues with those, there's no way to do that, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. You could go buy the sensors associated with reading the different cellular frequencies in the area, and you could do your own drive test.
Well, why don't you just get Gladiator Forensics to send us the tools in the program and we could verify it that way? Wouldn't that be the simpler way to do it?
I don't work for the
Argumentative.
company, sir, so I don't.
Okay. Wait.
I said objection argumentative.
This guy, Pryor, thinks he's going to give them a different tactic, but he says Bing instead of ping.
Well, it came and went quickly. Mr. Pryor and Mr. Balance, please don't talk at the same time as each other.
Now, the most accurate location data would actually come from the device itself. Would that be fair?
Can you clarify what you mean?
If you were looking at location data for a device, the best way to determine the location data is to actually have the device itself, right?
I would say it could aid, but I wouldn't necessarily say it would be the best because it depends on the settings of the actual device.
Okay. Now I want to go back to
Here comes some fun facts.
Exhibit 51, if we could. And Judge, if we could put that up there.
Yes, we'll ask the clerk to do that, please.
Exhibit E, EXHIBITY.
Now, with a pointer, you have some marks there, and it's showing a pond. Is that right?
It's showing.
A irrigation pond.
Yes, sir. I believe that's what it was.
Okay. And do you have an idea approximately, since you've been out there, how much property we're talking about here?
So if you are able to zoom out, it does have a scale on the bottom right, and that'll help.
And that I can't do.
Okay.
So what I'm looking at on the map, there's a road that runs, I believe north and south. Is that right?
Talking about this here, sir?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
And then initially you would put on the road running north and south, you'd put Alex Cox's car over at the top there somewhere. Is that right?
Thanks,
I believe that
Betsy.
was associated with September the 9th.
Okay. And then down below, there's a road that runs east-west.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then a little ways from the intersection of the north, south, east, west, it looks like a long driveway. Could you touch on that for me?
So are you talking over here?
No, I'm talking a little further right there.
Yes, sir.
And that's a driveway that goes into the property, correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've been at the property.
Okay, and then can you point where the location of the fire pit is?
So I believe it was somewhere in this area here.
Okay. And there's some sort of a green tree or a tree that's throwing some shade down there next to something brown, right?
Are you talking about here?
Up to the right there.
Okay.
And that's such a tree or some shade of some kind, correct?
It's something I can't remember
Okay.
from my time at the property.
Okay. All right, Judge, that's good for now.
He's so out of his league with FBI Cast. He's binging and he's talking to FBI Cast. I couldn't even do it.
Now, I want to go back to, I believe it was slide 20. Okay. And Judge, if we could have slide 20 put up there.
All right, slide 20 of exhibit 156.
Yeah, I asked him to
We'll
do
get the
that.
exhibit up. You can locate the slide.
So on this particular slide, I noticed that the blue box on the right-hand side says something does not include. Would you read that for me?
Sure. Does not include all activity between 12 a.m. and 5 o'clock a.m. Only locates with 100 meters or less. Margin of error are depicted.
Okay, so the way I'm reading this is that the purple box shows some various times at a location. Is that right?
Correct.
And do you know whose location that is in the purple box?
So that's associated with the Google location history for Alex Cox.
Okay, and where is the location specifically?
So the ones that I believe you're referring to here on the left side.
The purple ones, yeah.
So that's at 2:42 in the morning and 3:37 in the morning, just west of Lori Vallow's apartment.
So they're at or near Lori Vallow's apartment at those times, right?
The device is reporting just west of Lori Vallow's apartment. At that
Okay, and again, the times are what?
At 2:42 in the morning and then 3:37 in the morning.
And the margin of error on that is what?
4 meters
12 feet.
approximately.
So close to or in close proximity of Lori Vallow's apartment at that time in the morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, I guess I'm curious. I noticed that you put, and this is on September 9th, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
I noticed that you put down a couple of phones with Chad Daybell, right?
Yes, sir.
You put down a phone with Alex Cox, right?
Yes, sir.
You put down a phone with Lori Vallow.
Yes, sir.
But why aren't you looking at Melanie Gibb and David Warwick?
Oh,
Your Honor, objection misstates the evidence.
Overruled.
Why aren't you looking at phone records for David Warwick and Melanie Gibb?
So I was not asked to examine any records for those two.
Nobody asked you, no one provided that information to you?
I wasn't asked to examine records for those two.
Okay. Were you aware that at that time, at the location of Alex Cox's phone location, that in close proximity on that day, Melanie Gibb and David Warwick were also there? Were you aware?
Objection misstates the evidence.
Sustained.
So who provided you this phone data?
I don't recall specifically. I know multiple data sets were sent on different occasions from the numerous members of the investigative team.
And who in the investigating team determines what phone records you look at?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. So then at some point we go to a big yellow circle, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the phone location is showing in that big yellow circle, correct?
Correct.
And how long is that phone locator hitting in that big yellow circle?
I believe it was approximately an hour, but again, it's not showing on the screen, the bottom part of the page.
Okay. Now, what you didn't do, I noticed in your report that you also didn't mention before 12 a.m. on September 9th. Is that right?
Correct.
And are you aware of the phone location prior to 12 o'clock on September 9th?
I could look at it, but I don't recall what that location was.
bing.
Now, you didn't have, oops, I'm sorry, Judge, I bumped that and we can take that down. You didn't show Chad Daybell's location on September 23rd anywhere near those apartments. Is that correct?
I don't believe I did. I'd have to go back and look at the report to see. I think that was only on September the 9th.
And then in regards to the text messaging that you talked about, we don't know what the contents of that text message between all of these folks was discussing, correct?
We do not.
And you testified previously that it wasn't uncommon for Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to frequently be communicating, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, on a daily basis, multiple communications in the morning, correct?
I remember seeing significant amount of communications between the two.
And significant amount of communications in the evenings as well, right?
I believe there was evening hours as well. I would just need to examine the records in total to give you like approximate time.
Okay.
when those-
Are you aware that the two of those folks were having an affair?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. And you're aware as part of that affair that they'd be communicating. Wouldn't you expect them to be communicating quite regularly?
I would expect that to be the case. Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're what the French call les incompétents.
On those days that you talked about with Alex Cox being at the property on September 6th, September 25th, October 15th, did you happen to notice where Chad Daybell was on those days?
I don't recall looking at
Okay.
that information.
You didn't look into that, right?
I don't recall looking into that. No.
Okay. All right. Judge, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
All right, that concludes the cross-examination then. Mr. Wood, if you'd like to have redirect, you may.
Just briefly.
All right.
Okay, we're going to fast forward now to cousin of Tammy Daybell. We're going to fast forward to her cross exam right here, and this will conclude day 13. Basically, the cast team placed Alex Cox and Chad Daybell right at Chad Daybell's property, is basically what happened. Basically, busted.
Report to law enforcement?
Yes.
When did you do that?
In August of 2020.
Okay, here we go. Again, this is Tammy Daybell's cousin.
No, I don't have any more questions for this witness at this time.
All right. Cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
Yep. Good afternoon. Ma'am, this information, did you ever give a report to law enforcement?
Yes.
When did you do that?
In August of 2020.
Have you spoken to anybody else since August of 2020 about this in terms of law enforcement?
I've met with investigators a few times.
How many times?
Twice.
Okay. Do you recall when those were?
I don't.
Okay. Did you talk to the prosecuting attorney before you decided to testify today?
Yes.
Okay. When did you meet with the prosecuting attorney?
I met with him once about a month ago. And then this morning,
And which prosecutor did you meet with?
Rocky.
Rocky. Do you know Rocky?
Outside of court proceedings, no.
Okay. Now, your testimony is that at midnight, Tammy went downstairs to check on Chad in his office. Is that right?
Objection misstates the testimony.
Sustained.
Did you mention about him going downstairs to meet with Tammy going downstairs to meet with Chad at any point?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you make reference to?
When I was talking to Chad with my father, he said that Tammy had gone down to say that she had thrown up and was feeling a little better and then was going to bed.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So Tammy was upstairs in her bedroom, and then she went downstairs to go into an office to talk to Chad. Is that what you understood?
yes.
Okay. Are you aware that this is a one-story home, ma'am?
No, I've never been to their home.
Okay. And then after, again, when you were in the line with your mother, and you mentioned something about going downstairs, which downstairs were we going to?
Again, I haven't been to their home.
Okay. Nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Saying goodnight to the grandbaby. She's so sweet. I can't believe she FaceTimes, guys. Like a little
Ma'am,
grown up.
is there any question in your mind that you testified as accurately as you possibly can today?
Judge, I'm going to object. It goes beyond cross-examination.
Well, I'll sustain. I think that's actually an improper question. You can ask a different question if you like, Mr. Wixom.
Ma'am, when you heard Mr. Daybell explain the events with your dad, did your dad ask him anything about the layout of the home?
No,
Did you ask him anything?
no.
Do you doubt at all that he said that he?
Judge, I'm going to object. He's trying to bolster the witness. It's inappropriate.
Well, I'll let you finish the question, Mr. Wixom, and then I'll rule.
Thank you. Is there any question in your mind that what Chad said to your dad was that Tammy had went downstairs?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. That will conclude the testimony then of Ms. Munoz. Is she going to be recalled potentially by either side?
No. Okay, so that was it. That was it. Day 13, donezo. Moving into day 14. All right. Now, day 14, we have the first one up is going to be Eric Christensen, the chief medical examiner. And we're not going to go through the direct because it's all about Tammy's wounds and stuff. So here is cross-examination of the chief medical examiner of Idaho, which is now retired. They just retired. Chad probably loves this kind of talk. Death and medical examiners and exhuming.
All right, Mr. Pryor, you can cross. Can you turn on the microphone, please?
Let's do that again.
Ooh, be safe.
Judge, by stipulation of the parties, I'll move for admission of Exhibit 102 and 103. That's Defense Exhibit 102 and 103 that represents the autopsy. And then the first one is the 26-page autopsy. 103 would contemplate the additional pictures and some analysis as well by this witness.
All right, the defense has moved for admission of Exhibit 102. Does the state have any objection to that being admitted?
Your Honor, it's my understanding that that is the autopsy report created by the Office of the Utah Medical Examiner. And if that's what it is, in addition to some lab results and other findings, the state has no objection.
Okay, so as I understand, there'd be no objection on 102 and 103.
Bring it all in.
And when those become published, if they are, Ms. Blake, if they're not what you anticipated, let me know and we'll quickly review that to make sure they are the exhibits you believe have been admitted. So those are admitted, Mr. Pryor.
Okay. And Doctor, you mentioned that you're retired as the chief, was it the chief medical examiner out of Utah?
Yes.
Oh, random fun fact. I want to show you guys something. Look who is at the prosecution table. All the way over here. See this blonde at the end there? Remember Brian Koberger's hearings, the lady with the bun? That's her. That's why she hasn't been in any Brian Koberger's hearings, because she's been tied up with Daybell. But that's the same chick. It is in DDB. Another fun fact.
And that's out of Salt Lake City, is that right?
Taylorsville, but Salt Lake County, yes.
And I'm not familiar with Utah, so is that close to Salt Lake City?
Yes.
Okay. The government hub of the state of Utah, is that right? Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about the initial cause of death reported for Tammy Daybell, and it did say pulmonary edema. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you were able to confirm that through this autopsy as well, correct?
I was able to confirm through the autopsy that pulmonary edema was present, but
Right.
not that it was the cause of death.
Okay. Now, when we talk about pulmonary edema in this particular case, can you tell me how long would it have taken to produce the kind of pulmonary edema that you found during the autopsy?
I don't know.
There's no way to determine that.
No.
And there's also no way to determine whether it had advanced or whether it had declined. You exhumed Tammy Daybell's body, and you have to report the facts as you see the facts at the time upon the exhumation, right?
That's correct.
And at this point, you had initially indicated that you went in front of you didn't, but you were present when a hearing was held in front of a judge to make a determination as to whether or not they would have exhumed Tammy Daybell. Is that right?
That's correct.
And do you recall from your knowledge what was the reason for the exhuming the body at that time?
My recollection is it was to determine the cause of death.
Well, there had to have been some facts. You don't get to just dig somebody up.
Your Honor, counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
Sustained.
There has to be a reason at the hearing to determine why you're exhuming.
Your Honor, counsel's still testifying.
Sustained.
Your Honor, counsel's still
Isn't it
testifying.
true, Doctor, that there has to be a reason for the exhumation and not just be to re-examine findings? Is that correct?
I would assume so, yes.
Well, you were present. What was the reason given for digging Tammy Daybell's body back up?
I don't recall specifically what was presented.
Okay,
Oh,
so
oh.
what was the purpose of you going there if you don't remember why they dug her up?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Simmer down, Pryor. Simmer down.
Do you recall whether or not there were discussions about surrounding circumstances that could have influenced a decision to exhume?
I believe there were, yes.
Okay, and those circumstances that they justified for exhuming were the death of Charles Vallow, right?
Objection, Your Honor, counsel's testifying. The witness has said he doesn't recall.
The fact is those additional circumstances that you based the reason to dig Tammy Daybell up out of the ground was because of the death of Charles Vallow.
Objection, Your Honor, counsel's misstating. This witness was not the one that requested exhumation.
Sustained.
Do you recall whether or not there was a discussion about the death of Charles Vallow at the exhumation hearing?
I do not.
Do you recall whether there was discussion of Brandon Boudreaux as a basis for the exhumation of Tammy Daybell's body?
I also do not know.
Okay, so you don't remember any reason, is that right, for why they decided to dig a body up out of the ground?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, and it's asked and answered.
Sustained.
You don't have any explanation that you recall as to why they dug Tammy Daybell's body up out of the ground, do you?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, and asked and answered.
Overruled on that.
You don't have any.
He gets to answer though.
I think I said previously, my understanding was to determine the cause of death.
Okay, but you don't specifically remember the factors as to why they dug her up, right? That were offered to a judge?
I don't remember the specifics of the discussion.
Okay. And you don't, now you talked a little bit about Utah, and from what I understand, you can do it by request of the family, is that right? Or you can do it by request of going in front of a judge and giving justifiable reasons as to why you would dig a body up out of the ground, right?
I believe that is the way the statute reads.
Right. And in this particular case, the family was never notified, right?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for
Oh,
speculation.
man.
And
Was the family
irrelevant.
notified?
Overruled. If the witness has information, he can answer. And I want to hear the answer.
To my knowledge, the family was not notified.
Ooh.
So in other words, then the other side of the statute is that you went in front of a judge, not you, but someone went in front of a judge and got an order to exhume her body. Is that right?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, even though you were present, you don't remember the facts that were presented as.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Now, you made a comment in your autopsy that you performed.
Exactly, Mark.
And you noted that the bruises were what are called very non-specific bruises. You remember that?
I don't recall the specifics of how I described them in the report. I'd be happy to look at it and refresh my memory, but I don't. So bruises by nature are non-specific.
Okay. And do you recall testifying last April and May in another proceeding in which you, in response to a question, I described the bruises as non-specific, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when we're talking about non-specific bruises, what that means isn't it true? What that means is that you can't identify the cause of those bruises. Is that correct?
A specific cause, no.
Right. In fact, you can't tell how those bruises ended up on someone's body, correct?
That's correct.
All you can tell is that the nature of those bruises and whether they're bruises, right?
And I can offer opinions about how they might have been inflicted, but there's a wide variety of those.
But in this particular case, you said they're non-specific, correct?
Even non-specific bruising can have multiple potential.
Okay, what did
modes of
hers come from?
Infliction, yes.
Okay. And in this case, you identified the bruises as non-specific. We've established that,
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
And you can't tell me how those bruises were placed on the body of Tammy Daybell, correct?
I cannot.
Or how she got those bruises.
I cannot.
And the reality is we can go back as far as 24 hours and those bruises could have been 24 hours old. Isn't that true?
Potentially, yes.
Or 12 hours true, right?
Yes.
And we can't even put a legitimate time as to when those bruises actually got, or she incurred those bruises on her body, correct?
Beyond the timeframes we've spoken of, no.
Right. And in addition, you didn't speak to any of the family members, the immediately family members about these bruises on Tammy Daybell, did you?
I did not.
You didn't talk to the family about any medical history that Tammy may have had about treating herself for bruises, did you?
I did not.
You didn't look at any of the reports or any of the medicine from the time of her arrest in which there was a notation about bruising cream that Tammy Daybell was using, did you?
Could you repeat that? I'm not sure what you mean.
Did you see any medicine that indicated Tammy Daybell may have been treating her bruises with bruising cream?
She had a number of ointments, creams, oils, and other things at the residence, which those that were documented in photographs by the coroner, we did look up and go through.
Okay. And based on history, in speaking with the family, you weren't able to get any information about whether or not Tammy Daybell was prone to bruising, correct?
I did not speak to the family.
Okay. Did you look at any other statements by Mr. Daybell while he talked about vomiting and fainting and falling over? Do you recall looking at those factors?
I did not see statements directly from him, but he was quoted as talking to various officers and others at the scene about those things. Yes.
And that leads into my next question, is that the information you got about what Tammy Daybell reported was given to you by police officers, not necessarily statements Mr. Daybell made. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if we recap a little bit, we don't know why we dug Tammy Daybell up out of the ground, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying misstates the evidence.
Sustained.
And move a strike.
We got an exhumation order to take Tammy Daybell out of the ground because you were there for that, right?
We did.
Okay. You don't recall the reasons why you got the exhumation?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Okay. So you talked a
Me
little bit
either,
about
Jess.
Utah, and then you talked a little bit about Idaho and how in Idaho it's up to a coroner to determine whether or not there's an autopsy that needs to be performed. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And in Utah, it may be a little different, right?
it is.
You talked a little bit about how it's not ideal to conduct an autopsy after embalming and burial. Would you agree with that?
It's certainly not ideal. Yes.
Right.
I would agree with that.
And Judge, could I, actually, I need the exhibit. And I'll get the number, Judge. I'm sorry.
I know, and everybody was freaking out that
think
she
it's 179.
died, that knew her. They were like, what? Tammy
Judge,
died?
I'd like
Like,
to republish exhibit one. Judge, I'd like to republish exhibit 179.
You may.
oh my God, Pryor. Look at Chud.
Best laid plans, right? So we're looking at exhibit 179. You recognize that those are your dots, aren't they?
They are.
So when I look at that, how many bruises are on the right arm of Tammy Daybell?
8.
And there are 3 on the front or 1 down at the bottom, right?
4 on the front and 4 on the back.
Okay. And then how many total bruises would be on the left arm?
1.
And then how many bruises up on the chest area?
1.
So you talked about asphyxiation and you made a determination that there's asphyxiation here, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what you're suggesting is that Tammy Daybell someone stopped her from breathing, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess what I'm confused about is how is someone asphyxiating Tammy Daybell if there's one person holding her arms?
Objection actually withdrawn.
You can answer.
I wasn't there, so I can't tell you the specifics.
Right. And the other question is that if someone was holding her arms down,
God, how awful.
how did bruises get on the front of the arm and on the back of the right arm?
You can have bruising on front and back from a grab.
Okay. And then that person would also at the same time be grabbing the lower part of the right arm too at the same time?
Not necessarily at the same time, no.
Okay. And then while they're asphyxiating her, they grab the
This is horrible.
left arm and there's only one little bruise on the left arm, right?
There is 1 bruise on the left biceps, yes.
And then at the same time, somebody puts something over her mouth while they're holding her arms to suffocate her, right?
It could have happened that way.
It could have, right? It's possible. It could also have happened that this wasn't asphyxiation, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. You're firm on this idea that you think it's asphyxiation, right?
I do.
And that determination you made is as a result of just talking to the police and after you did this investigation, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence.
Sustained.
Think about Shanann. She knew
Now,
her
in
husband
terms
was
of,
distant,
we
but
talked
didn't know
about this
why.
previously as well, but
Scary.
the bruising alone does not lead you to asphyxiation. Is that right?
It does not.
Okay. And the facts about other activities that may have been occurring, particularly Brandon Boudreaux and Charles Vallow, don't lead to asphyxiation either, right?
No.
Now, previously, last year, you testified, and there was some discussion about the 5 different levels of determination. Do you recall that?
I don't specifically, no.
Or the 5 options.
I think
I'm
so,
sorry, the
Amy.
5
It's all
options.
he's
There are
got.
5 manners of death. Yes.
Right. And I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong term. I'm apologize. I wrote the word down the wrong way. The 5 determinations. And can you go over those with me again?
Sure.
Go ahead.
On a death certificate, there are essentially in every state except New York and I think New Jersey, maybe Connecticut, there are 5 options for what the certifier of the death can list as the manner of death. Those are natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined, or could not be determined.
Okay. And I guess I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the undetermined one.
Okay.
And when you come up with an undetermined diagnosis, that means you don't have any reason that leads you to say this is absolutely the way this person passed away, correct?
Undetermined manner is used when you don't have enough circumstantial or investigative or autopsy findings, whatever. You don't have enough information to decide between 2 different manners. And that can be, for example, in an overdose, could either be a suicide or it can be an accident. In this specific case, it could be, there's allegations of that her death is natural. If I believed it could be natural or it could be homicidal, then it could be undetermined because I can't really decide between those 2, but I did decide between those 2.
So that is a situation where if you don't have enough evidence to determine exactly why someone died, you make the determination of undetermined. Is that correct?
If you don't have enough, certainly if the cause of death is undetermined, then the manner of death will usually also be undetermined.
And that doesn't mean there was foul play. You just don't have the information to make that assessment. Would that be fair?
Yes.
So in other words, if in this situation there was insufficient evidence to determine a cause of death, it would be listed as undetermined, right?
The cause of death could be listed as undetermined. Yes.
And at that point, that's a situation, like I said before, where it doesn't mean that it's homicide. It doesn't mean that there was foul play. You just don't have enough information to make that decision. Would that be fair?
It would be, yes, to an extent. It's possible that it doesn't mean that there's not foul play necessarily. Like if, for example, you call it undetermined because you think it might be a homicide or a suicide and you can't decide between the 2. Mm-hmm. If you call it undetermined because you can't necessarily decide between those 2, means you think it's just as likely that it was as it wasn't. I can't tell.
It could also
could be, but it might not be.
It could also be a situation where there's no medical information that leads you to any conclusion as to why someone passed away, right?
It could be.
Right. And there are situations where people pass away and there's no discernible reason why that happened. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you made mention of all the medical reports that you reviewed. Which medical reports did you review?
Reviewed records from Seasons Medical Clinic, from another client, whatever Seasons was before it was Seasons. I forget, it had a different name. She'd also been seen at a clinic in Utah before moving back to Idaho, and we'd looked at those as well.
And they were just quite frankly, those were just a matter of a couple of pages, right?
Not a lot of records, no.
Right. Well, a couple of pages, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative, asked and answered. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
Well, it was late. It's already answered, so overruled.
Okay. And you looked at the Seasons Medical and you looked at the other medical records and you were aware that 5 years prior to Tammy Daybell's death, she was diagnosed with anemia, right?
I believe so, yes.
And you didn't talk to the family about how that anemia had been progressing on Tammy Daybell, is that right?
I did not.
Okay. And you were also aware that Tammy Daybell was taking a form of, and I don't want to, fluoxetine.
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 Mm-hmm.
Fluoxetine.
There's a reason I'm not a doctor.
Oh.
Fluoxetine, and that's a form of Prozac, right?
Yes, it's a generic.
And if fluoxetine is mixed with the wrong kind of other medicine, whether it's herbs or supplements or anything else, those can have significant consequences, correct?
There can be certainly drug interactions with herbal stuff. I'm not aware of any specific ones of fluoxetine with herbal remedies.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ramsey. And as part of your analysis and the testing for poisons and all of the other testing that you did, you're not really able to test for the herbals and the supplements and everything else and its interaction with fluoxetine to see if that had any impact, could you?
I think that's a 2-part question. There's not really any way to test for drug interactions. You can test whether a drug is present or not, but certainly we don't have the ability to test for most herbal supplements.
Okay. And the fact that those herbal supplements, whether or not they could have an adverse impact with the fluoxetine that Tammy Daybell was taking, correct?
Don't have a way to determine that.
Right.
Whether they were even present.
He's going to blame this on
the
Prozac.
heavy lungs.
I'm sorry, the heavy what?
Heavy lungs.
Oh,
the heavy
yes.
lungs. That's an unusual medical malady. Would you agree?
It's a non-specific finding.
Thank you, Flo.
But it
Welcome,
could have an impact
Sybil.
on the cause of death here, correct?
It could, yes.
Right. And you didn't take that into consideration before you made your asphyxia determination, right?
No, absolutely, we did.
No, you did?
Mhm.
Okay.
Welcome in, Mags.
You testified that asphyxia is really a diagnosis of exclusion, correct?
It is.
So in other words, you look at all other possibilities, and if you can't find anything else, you go to asphyxia. Would that be fair?
If you can't find anything else, more likely, yes.
Okay. Or what is if you can't find anything else? Why wouldn't you just go undetermined?
You might in some circumstances.
Okay.
He's arguing the
One of
cause
the things
death.
I want to ask you about are seizures.
Okay.
And when a person has a seizure, it's not always a result of there being some sort of physical evidence to support that, is there?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, there's a seizure can occur at any time. Any one of us could have a seizure at any time. Would you agree with that?
Could and is likely are very different things.
Okay. Okay. So are you at this point saying and excluding the fact that Tammy Daybell could have had a seizure as a possible cause of this death?
No, I can't 100% exclude it. I just think it's
Okay.
very unlikely.
You think it's unlikely? Okay.
Yes, very unlikely.
In spite of the fact that Chad Daybell talked about fainting and those types of issues, you're saying that because of that, it's very unlikely there could be a seizure, correct?
That's what I believe, yes.
But
Okay.
never
And
fainted
you're
at
also
clogging.
saying,
Thank you, staff. Welcome, PKC.
well, let me ask you this. A seizure can happen at any time unannounced.
That's
correct?
for you too, Flo.
It can.
Okay. Or there could be some instances where there's some medical proof to support a seizure, correct?
You can have a seizure, yes, because you have a tumor or an infection or other things, or you have a condition that leads to a seizure, yes.
Okay. And then we talk a little bit about arrhythmia.
Mhm.
And with arrhythmia,
Arrhythmia.
there isn't always an indication with arrhythmia that there's such as there isn't always a damaged heart or a faulty valve as a result of arrhythmia. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
In fact, arrhythmia can happen at any time. Any one of us with healthy hearts could suddenly have an arrhythmia and die, correct?
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely?
Yes, very
Okay.
unlikely.
Well, does
Hey,
that
Mims.
very unlikely change when you look at the fact that Tammy Daybell's family history had a history of heart issues? Does that change the very unlikely to likely?
Not in the context of what her heart looked like at autopsy.
Okay. And again, because her heart didn't look healthy or unhealthy, that isn't always the point, is it? Arrhythmia can occur even in the healthiest of hearts, correct?
Yes and no. Not in there is a reason that people have arrhythmias.
Okay.
It's not always apparent by looking at the heart. The heart certainly, as I discussed previously, can look normal, and you can have arrhythmias. But there will be something wrong with it, either microscopically evident or molecularly evident.
Okay. And molecularly evident means that there's some sort of syntax that hit the heart and it suddenly just stops working properly, right?
It would just, an arrhythmia just means no rhythm. And if your heart stops beating, you have no rhythm.
Right. And if the heart for some reason stops beating,
Kind of like when
and
he
there's some
dances,
sort of
he's probably
arrhythmia,
got no rhythm.
suddenly we get the pink foam that starts developing in these heavy lungs, right?
You certainly can, yes.
Right. And if we get a seizure, and as a result of the seizure, the heart stops beating, and then these heavy lungs start accumulating the significant amount of pink foam we found in Tammy Daybell's body, correct?
It can happen that way, yes.
And if the anemia goes undiagnosed for 5 years and she's not getting treatment, and for some reason there's insufficient oxygen to reach these heavy lungs,
Hey, Sherry.
we could get the same result, correct?
I don't believe so. I mean,
Okay.
Not given the activities that she was described as doing. She may have been
Okay.
anemic, but she was not anemic to the point it would cause those kinds of problems.
All right.
Okay. He's like, whatever.
In regards to a time of death, what I understood you were testifying to is there's really no definitive way to determine an accurate time of death. Would that be fair?
No way to determine a very specific time of death. A range, yes. A specific time, no.
Judge, I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right. Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Christensen, you were asked a lot about the exhumation order. Do you recall that?
I do.
You were not the one requesting that, is that correct?
That's correct.
You were also asked about whether or not you spoke to Chad's kids, and you indicated no.
That's correct.
Hi, Jane.
Did any of Chad's kids ever reach out to the office of the medical examiner?
They did not. To my knowledge. It's possible they might have, and I was not aware of it, but they didn't reach out and ask for me.
Did anyone ever pass on information that they'd reported to the office of the Utah medical examiner?
No.
So you reviewed documents you were provided from law enforcement, is that correct?
Yes,
And those documents contained statements provided by Chad Daybell?
they did.
There were no documents provided that had significant information from his kids, is that correct?
There were some about his kids, various interviews that have been conducted with their friends and things of that nature, but no, not from them directly, I don't believe.
So you don't know, you wouldn't know if the kids ever agreed to speak with law enforcement, is that correct?
I do not know.
And if Chad's kids had made statements about Tammy's health, would those have been documents that you would have requested or wanted to review?
Absolutely.
So if they weren't provided to you, would you have any reason to think that those exist?
No.
And you were asked about Utah being a little different than Idaho's system. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
Would you describe them as a little different?
I guess Utah's and Idaho's death investigation systems are kind of on the opposite poles of the spectrum in the US.
And I think we talked about this, but Idaho, a coroner does not have to have any medical training, correct?
That's correct.
Whereas a forensic pathologist or medical examiner goes through years of schooling. They're a doctor.
Leading, sustained.
Your Honor, it's sustained on leading. Is that correct?
It's
Because
sustained.
I think it's within the scope.
It's not outside the scope, correct?
Sherry,
Just
hi.
for my next question, I wanted to
Ooh,
clarify that.
70,
Yeah, I
nice.
only sustained as it being leading.
I think we talked before, but you have worked in systems where a coroner is used, correct?
Yes.
And in your experience, do coroners have to have any medical training?
No.
And to be a forensic pathologist, again, what training do you go through?
Have to have a college degree, a medical degree, and residency training in pathology, and then forensic fellowship training.
And in Utah, again, who is it that would determine if an autopsy is to be completed?
It would be done by the Office of the Medical Examiner,
So one of the individuals that has all that medical training?
either by them or one of our investigators. And if there are questions, then they ask us.
You were asked about the 5 different, I believe, manners that can be indicated.
That's correct.
Is it common practice for the Office of the Utah Medical Examiner to look at the surrounding facts in addition to what's concluded from the autopsy?
Yes.
And I think you talked about an example of a drug overdose, that there could be several manners, even if that's the cause.
Yes.
You were asked about a history of anemia. Can you explain what anemia is?
Anemia is when your blood count, the percentage of your blood that's made up of red blood cells, drops below normal levels. Men have a slightly higher normal range than women, but they're both in the 35 to 50% range, more or less. That percentage of your blood is made up of red blood cells that carry oxygen around your body. You can develop anemia, which is a number lower than that for a variety of reasons. It can happen from vitamin deficiencies, can happen from iron deficiency, can happen from cancers, anything that infiltrates your bone marrow, can happen because you bleed. It's not uncommon in young women with heavy periods and things, for example, to end up being anemic because of blood loss. But it can be from traumatic blood loss as well. You can be acutely anemic because you got your arm broken and torn open in a car crash or something. All of those things can lead to anemia, but generally speaking, a progressive slow type of anemia, whether it's vitamin deficiency or something like that, is something that your body is able to compensate for to some extent, that you remain functional, though you might be fatigued or other things of that nature. But it's not, you don't have normal oxygen carrying capacity. And so if you went from living at sea level to the mountains, you might notice more of a difference than if you weren't anemic, things of that nature.
Sustained.
Is anemia treatable?
Yes, most times.
And I think you indicated you'd seen a history of Tammy having anemia maybe 5 years before her death.
I believe that's when it was documented, yes.
And if there were no other indications of anemia in her medical records, could that indicate that it was treated?
Overruled.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, we're not seeing any additional notations in medical records about anemia other than the past history. Could that indicate that the anemia was treated? And Your Honor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
Dr. Christensen's testimony was he saw a notation of it from 5 years previous to that, and Mr. Pryor went into it on his cross-examination.
No, I'm going to rule on that. It's overruled, Mr. Pryor. You can continue.
Could that indicate that the anemia was treated?
It could. It just means that it certainly was not mentioned again as a problem.
In looking at those medical records, do you recall seeing any indication that Tammy had low blood pressure?
Her blood pressure was on the lowish side of normal, but no indication that she had a diagnosis of hypotension or low blood pressure.
Could you use the microphone, please, Mr. Pryor?
Foundation judge, I'd like to know what report he's referencing where he saw that information.
And Your Honor, my question was just about the medical records that he reviewed in general.
All right, then he should be able to specify which medical record she's talking about,
Mr.
Judge.
Pryor, this is not an objection. It's just an argument now. Is there an objection?
There is, Foundation.
All right. The objection is overruled.
In the medical reports you reviewed, you didn't see any sign of low blood pressure.
I did not.
In the medical records you reviewed, did you see any signs of seizures?
No.
In the medical reports you reviewed, did you see any indication that Tammy had had a prior history of any negative drug interactions between her prescription medication and herbal remedies?
No.
And counsel asked you about the bruises on Tammy and them being labeled as not specific. Do you
Yes.
recall that?
Be careful,
Yes.
Shell.
You indicated that sometimes you are able to form an opinion as to how those may have been inflicted. Is that correct?
I can answer hypotheticals about how they may have been inflicted, yes.
And based on your training and experience, where those bruises were located, could they be consistent with someone being restrained?
They could be, yes.
And you were asked a lot about those pictures and if someone was holding Tammy down and then suffocating her. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes. Yes.
Where the bruises were located, would it be possible for someone to have been restraining her while someone else suffocated her?
It's possible.
Based on your experience and and the autopsy and your review of documents, in your opinion, is it likely that Tammy died of a seizure?
No.
Based on your training, experience, review of the records and autopsy, is it likely that Tammy Daybell died of a cardiac arrhythmia?
No.
Based on your experience, review of the documents and autopsy, is it likely Tammy Daybell died of a drug overdose or drug interaction?
No.
Based on your experience, training, review of reports on the autopsy, is it your opinion Tammy most likely or likely died of asphyxiation?
Yes.
And again, what did you determine the cause of death to be?
Asphyxia.
And what did you determine the manner of death to be?
Homicide.
I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you. That did not go beyond the scope of cross.
Judge, can we have a sidebar?
Yes.
Judge, can we have an ice cream bar? Yes. Next one is, who is the next one?
Documents and autopsy.
Neighbor, I think.
All right. I'll note that Ms. Gilbert's now been placed under oath. Before we begin with testimony, I just want to inquire, have you watched any of this trial on either the live stream or here in person at all?
No.
Okay. Have you talked to anybody else about any testimony they've given in trial?
No.
Okay. Thank you for letting the court know that. Ms. Blake, you can inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Alice Gilbert,
Neighbor. Miss Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Dumbbells
And
neighbors.
Ms. Gilbert, do you know an individual named Chad Daybell?
I do.
How do you know him?
He was my neighbor, and when we moved into the neighborhood, we got to know him through our community and our ward.
Did you also know Tammy or Tamara Daybell?
I do.
And did you know her the same way?
Yes.
Freaking allergies.
And what did you refer to her as, Tammy or Tamara?
I called her Tammy.
And when you moved into the neighborhood, do you recall approximately when that would have been?
It was March of 2017.
And were the Daybells already living there?
Yes.
Did you get to know Tammy or Chad? Did you get to know one of them better than the other one?
Tammy. I got to know Tammy better.
And how did you end up getting to know Tammy?
We worked in the same church calling together. And so I got to know her through that church calling,
And when you say church calling, what church is that associated with?
the LDS church.
And
Church
what callings did the two of
calling?
you hold where you worked closely?
I was the Relief Society president, and she was my first counselor.
What does that even
How
mean?
often do you think you saw Tammy?
We met once a week and on Sundays.
And did that seeing each other twice a week continue for an extended period of time?
Until her death.
And do you recall when the two of you were given the callings?
October of 2018.
So for about a year, you would see Tammy about twice a week.
Yes.
Did you get to know Tammy pretty well?
I thought so. I thought we did.
And can you describe Tammy a little bit, your relationship with her? Let me back up. Can you describe a little bit about what Tammy was like?
Yes. She was great to work with. She was organized when we had our meetings. She could worked on the computer. So when we had to change anything, she could do it in a flash. She did all the computer work. When we organized activities, we valued her opinion and was grateful to have her input on things. And she would say, keep it simple, keep our activities simple. And we did, and that helped a lot. She had a lot of empathy for some of the women who were struggling in the ward, and she would relate those things to us in our meetings. She also had a very good wit with her.
Did you have occasions to observe Chad and Tammy together?
I did, mostly at church, and they seemed great at church. You know, it was just normal. It was, and we had activities. He did come and help set up some chairs for activities, and so that seemed normal, and I really didn't think much of it.
At some point in time, did you feel like their interactions changed?
A little bit, yes. In 2019, it just seemed distant. It just seemed to be distant between the two. But I just noticed them at church.
Did Tammy ever talk to you about her marriage?
She didn't. I think the only thing she did mention was that sometimes the finances were a little strained, but she didn't mention anything else.
When you observed Tammy, did you ever notice her appear to slow down?
No.
Did you ever notice any change in her activity level prior to her death?
No.
Did she ever complain to you about any health issues?
No.
Did you ever observe Tammy have any shaking fits?
No.
Did you ever observe Tammy faint?
No.
How did you learn about Tammy's death?
On the morning of the 19th, I received a phone call from Emma, and she was...
Objection, Judge. This is going to call for some hearsay.
It's eliciting hearsay on that part, so that's sustained.
And just to clarify, when you say on the 19th, is that October 19th of 2019?
Yes.
And you indicated that Emma had phoned you. How did Emma seem when you talked to her?
She was sobbing.
And after that, based on that phone call, without saying what Emma said, did you learn anything in relation to Tammy?
That she had passed away.
Objection, Judge. Calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
At some point, did someone else take the phone?
Chad. He took the phone.
And what did Chad tell you?
He asked me not to tell anybody for about an hour that she had passed away. And I said, well, I need to tell the bishop. And he said, no, don't tell the bishop. And I knew that the bishop was going to work. And so I called him anyway and informed him.
And what you called to inform him was of Tammy's death?
Yes.
Were you surprised to hear of her passing?
Yes.
And why were you surprised?
I had just talked to her on Wednesday and she was fine.
Can you imagine? You just talked to her?
She was excited. She had just gotten a new grandbaby.
Oh, man.
We had talked about Mark and his mission, and she had told us experiences of his mission, and she was excited with things.
I know, and
On
Emma,
October
like,
19th, after
wouldn't you
learning of
want
her
your mom
death,
when you just had a
at some
baby?
point, did you end up going to the Daybell residence?
Yes. My husband and I went over at about 8:30 in the morning, And Chad answered the door and he gave us a hug. And we went in, and all the children, except for Mark and their spouses, were sitting there in the living room. They were stunned. The children were stunned. They could hardly speak and crying.
Did you end up making any observations of Chad when you arrived?
Yes, when I asked him what happened, and he said that Tammy vomited at midnight, and they think she passed away at 2 a.m., and that her legs were hanging over the bed and that she had fallen out of bed. He also said they think, how did I say this? That they think she died of an embolism.
And Chad provided all this information the morning of her death?
Yes.
How did Chad appear to you?
He wasn't as upset as the children. He was ready to tell us, and he wasn't as devastated as the children were.
And you indicated you'd just seen her the Wednesday before her death.
Yeah.
Did she complain to you at all that day of any health issues?
No. And I knew she was taking clogging lessons when we would have activity night.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point, just going into a narrative.
What?
You can answer.
How is it a
We
narrative?
had activity nights, which started at I think 6:30. She would leave early, maybe 8 o'clock, because she was going to a clogging class. And so in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going home to bed at 8 o'clock. She was going to a clogging class. So I admired her for doing that.
On Wednesday when you saw her, did Tammy have a cough that you noticed?
No,
Did she have any kind of a coughing fit around that time?
I didn't notice any.
After arriving at the Daybell residence, did you do something else that morning?
Yes, we had asked if they had breakfast, and they hadn't. So my husband and I said, well, we'll go get you breakfast. And as we stood up to go, Chad told us that her funeral was going to be on Tuesday and a memorial on Wednesday. And I was surprised. And I said, well, did you plan this? And he said, no, but I was surprised that fast that he could tell me that.
And when you ask if he planned it, why did you ask that?
Because I know what it takes to plan a funeral with a ward and to organize the church and have the ladies in the ward provide the meal. And you need to ask the sisters to volunteer to provide meals. And it takes time. All of it takes time. So I was really surprised. But then he said her funeral was in Springville. That also surprised me because we were there in Idaho.
And do you recall what day of the week October 19th was?
Saturday,
And the funeral was going to be on
Tuesday.
And did Chad respond when you asked if he had already planned the funeral or if he and Tammy had talked about it before?
He said no, but I felt like it had been planned.
Did you end up attending the funeral?
Yes. I needed to see her. So my husband and I went to the funeral in Springfield. And I needed to see her in the casket. And she looked nice in the casket.
Did you ever talk to Chad about why he held the funeral in Springville?
I didn't. I just assumed it was because they lived there before. So I didn't ask.
When you were at the funeral, do you recall making any observations of Chad?
When we viewed her before the funeral, and it was just him standing by the casket. It didn't seem really mournful with him. I said, oh, she looks good. And he said, yes, she does. And we didn't cry. We didn't, it didn't seem mournful. And then we went into the chapel to sit for the funeral. And I sat by, and our bishop had driven down, so we sat with him.
During the funeral, do you recall if Chad spoke?
Yes, all the children spoke, and he spoke last. I was impressed with the children's talks that fast. They did a nice job to their mother. I was surprised because it takes a day to drive. So to go funeral on Tuesday, they would have driven Monday. They did the children did a nice job, and Chad spoke last. I was surprised because most spouses are too devastated to speak. And so I was surprised that he spoke at her funeral, and it was last. And it was like a church talk. The other talks were more loving tributes to their mother. His was more church talk.
Because he's Chud Daybell.
And do you recall if there was a memorial service held?
It was held the next day in Idaho, but I did not attend because I had just been to her funeral.
Did you end up having a role or playing a part in taking a meal to Chad's family?
Yes. So our presidency and the bishop provided a meal for them after the memorial. And so we took it over to them after. And we had put it down for them to eat, and the kids had started to eat. And Chad told us that he was moving out, that he couldn't be there, and that he was going to move to Rexburg to a condo. And we asked him, like, do you need help or anything? He said no, that his friend had a condo for him, that he wasn't there very often, so that he told him he could stay there.
And you said do you recall, did Chad refer to the friend as a he?
I took it as that, and I'm thinking he said he, because he said he wasn't there very often, and so he could stay there.
So Tammy's pronounced dead on Saturday, correct? And by the following Wednesday, Chad's got plans to move out of the house.
Yes.
Do you recall anything else that morning standing out to you as far as what Chad told his kids?
He had told his kids to go ahead go through Tammy's things after he told us he was moving out, and that surprised me too. That's maybe I'm more sentimental, but it just seemed fast. And they kind of took it in stride, and I think they did do that.
Psychopathy.
In the time just after Tammy's death, did you have an opportunity to observe any of the Daybell children, so Chad and Tammy's children?
Hi, Shamrock.
I went and saw Emma on Friday, and she was sobbing. She's really struggling, and she was getting really sick. She lost a lot of weight. We had organized meals for her. I know the school district was taking meals into her and Garth. She was struggling. She told me she missed
Judge,
her mother.
objection.
Grounds.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
Did Emma appear to be struggling to you?
Yes.
Did Garth appear to be struggling as well?
Yes.
And on Friday, to the best of your knowledge, had Chad moved out of the residence?
Yes. I think he moved after the memorial.
So you visited with Garth and Emma just less than a week after their mother's
on Friday. Yeah.
Was Chad there when you went to visit him?
No.
And when you say the
He was
house
in
you
Hawaii,
went to,
wasn't
what
he?
house was Emma staying in at that time? Do you recall?
Yeah, she lived Keeney Corner from Chad's house.
And do you know what house Garth was staying in?
And Garth was living in Chad's house.
At some point, did you end up reaching out to Chad?
Yeah, so we thought we would call and see how he was doing. And I think it was Saturday, the 26th of October. We called him to see if we could come and visit with him. And he said no, that he would come to our place. So he came on the 26th. He came over to our place. I think it was more toward the evening when he came.
And Judge, for foundation purposes, that would have been the month of what and year?
Like, do you want to clarify when that happened, please?
When you talk about the 26th, are we still in October of 2019?
Yes,
So just shortly after Tammy's passing.
yes.
Y'all
And
heard
Chad
that?
indicated to you he didn't want you to come to his place, but he'd come to yours.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, I'll come over to your place." So we said, "Okay."
Did you ever end up seeing where Chad was living in Rexburg?
No,
And did he in fact end up coming to your place?
he did.
And did you end up having a conversation with him at that time?
Yes, he sat at our kitchen table, and I had made cookies and thought that, we would make it nice. And he said that he found the woman he was going to marry.
Oh my God.
And
over cookies? Hey,
we
Brian
were
and
absolutely
Jill.
stunned when he said that.
Wow.
And we asked him, "Well, where did you meet her?" And he said, "At the conference in St. George in 2018. And we asked who she was, and he wasn't going to tell us at first. And then he said, "Well, I'll tell you. Her name is Lori Vallow."
Had you heard the name Lori Vallow before then?
I hadn't. I was thinking, who is Lori Vallow? And then he mentioned that she had done a podcast with Melanie Gibb. And then I realized that's who that was.
Had you ever met Melanie Gibb in person?
Not then. I hadn't met her in person.
And you'd never met Lori Vallow at that point?
No.
And to the best of your recollection, this was around October 26th?
Yes.
So just 7 days after Tammy's passed away?
Yeah.
Were you surprised to hear that Chad had already found someone else to marry?
Absolutely.
You're kidding.
At some point,
you met him?
Did you end up meeting Lori Vallow?
Yes. While he was at our home, he said that she was in town. Would we like to meet her? We said yes. Tuesday nights, my husband and I had gone to the temple. So we were in the temple on Tuesday nights. We were waiting in a room for a meeting to begin that following Tuesday. And he tapped us on the shoulder and had us step out in the hallway. And then that's where we met Lori and her niece, Melanie, and a friend. And I cannot remember her name.
And that was your first time meeting Lori?
Yes.
And it was at the temple?
It was at the temple.
And Judge, could we have some foundation as to the date, time?
Your Honor, that's already been discussed.
I must have missed it, Judge.
I must have missed it.
Ms. Gilbert, at some point after that, did Chad and Lori end up coming to your house?
Yes. And it was in that week, and I think it was Friday from that Tuesday that he came over with her. And it was cold when they came in. I asked her if she was getting used to the cold, and she said she'd bought some warm clothes. And they sat on the couch. And it was awkward.
And when you say it was awkward, did you make observations of Chad and Lori's interactions?
Yes, they were very affectionate with each other.
Psychopathy?
More than I had ever seen Chad. It was very affectionate with her, and they were giggling and laughing. And
Creep town, dude.
My husband and I were embarrassed.
Had you ever seen Chad act that way with Tammy?
No.
Did you end up talking at that time to Lori about her family?
I did. I asked her if she'd been married, and she said yes, that her husband had died in December of a heart attack. I asked her if she had children, and then Chad said that she had recently had a daughter that had passed. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I said, "How many?" And she said, "Thank you." And I said, "How many children do you have?" And she kind of stammered and said they were stepchildren, and I did not get a definite answer on that.
Evil.
When Chad said that she'd recently lost a daughter, did Lori say anything to correct that or change it?
No.
And this would have occurred end of October, beginning of November of 2019. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
You also talked about, you asked Lori if she was getting used to the cold. Do you recall anything about that particular October?
Yes, it was a very cold October. It was an early frost and a hard frost. So the farmers were getting their potatoes early. I used to work for an ag company. And so the importance of the potatoes not freezing And not only that, they were helping each other to get their crops out early. So it was a cold October.
When Chad and Lori were there, did they talk to you and your husband about plans for a future together?
Yes, they had talked about getting married, but they didn't know when or where yet. They planned on taking the kids to Disneyland at Thanksgiving time.
Oh my God. And these people didn't think
And
Tammy was
did
unalive?
Chad tell you anything about his plans to write a book?
Yes, he told us he was going to Hawaii to write a book. But I didn't know they were going to live there. He just said he was planning on writing a book and going to Hawaii.
So Chad mentioned he was going to be going to Hawaii,
Wow.
correct?
Yes.
And he and Lori also mentioned their plans to get married to you.
Judge, there's been some leading here.
Sustained.
And this took place in end of October, beginning of November 2019.
Yes.
When they talked about taking the kids to Disneyland, do you know which kids they were referencing?
It was Chad's children.
Disneyland?
Did they ever mention taking any of Lori's children with them?
No, I had the impression that she was an empty nester, and I assumed the daughter was older that had passed, from a disease or cancer or something, but I assumed she didn't have any other children.
Did Chad or Lori provide you any details as to how Lori's daughter died?
No, and I did not ask.
And Your Honor, I'm just looking at the time, and now may be a good time to take a break in testimony for the lunch hour.
Okay, I appreciate that, Ms. Blake. We will go ahead and take the.
All right, we're going to skip over their little break. Thank you for being here, too. And Jill, that is nuts. So Jill was telling us in chat that she actually met Chad Daybell in Ogden, Utah back in the day when he worked for the newspaper. Crazy. And she said he was a bit creepy. His look was a bit creepy even then. Thank you for being here, Jill, and sharing your experience.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record on KCR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We just concluded our lunch recess. Ms. Gilbert is on the stand under direct examination at this time, the state continuing. And I will remind the witness you're still under oath for your testimony. With that, once you're ready, Ms. Blake, you can proceed with your continuing direct.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Her husband's up next, by the way. Mr. Gilbert.
Ms. Gilbert, I think we left off. I'd ask you if Chad or Lori provided you any details regarding how Lori's daughter died.
No.
And you talked about going to clean a house. Was that Emma's house?
That was Emma's house when we took meals to her and she had gotten quite sick. And so I'd gone to clean her house and for her.
Why was Emma
At
so sick?
some point, did you learn that Lori's children were missing?
I did learn. I learned, let's see. I believe it was after
Jill?
November. I learned that they were missing. And I learned who their mother was and that she was married to Chad. So my husband and I called Chad and asked him, are these her children that are missing? And he said that, yes, that it was a custody battle and that when everything came out, it would be fine.
And would this have been after Chad and Lori had told you of their plans to get married?
Yes, I think it was after they were married.
And after that visit in late October, early November, where both Chad and Lori were present, did you learn whether or not Chad was still in Idaho?
He was still in Idaho when they came to visit us. And then it's when I cleaned Emma's house, I believe. And that's when she told me they had gotten married.
Did you learn where Chad had gotten married?
Yes.
And where was that?
In Hawaii.
After his marriage, did Chad ever come to your residence again?
Yes, he came and showed us wedding pictures of their wedding there in Hawaii, and was quite excited to show us his wedding pictures.
And do you recall approximately how much time had passed between he and Lori's first visit to your house and then that second visit when they were married?
I think it was 2 weeks.
Were you surprised to see wedding photos?
Yes.
And why were you surprised?
I was surprised they'd got married so early.
Yeah,
I was
Jane, that's
really
what I'm
surprised
saying.
when they had told me they didn't know when or how, but then I was surprised that it was so early.
And you were friends with Tammy, right?
Yes.
At some point after that visit, when Chad and Lori showed you the wedding photos, did Chad come to your residence again?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
He came after Lori was arrested in Hawaii, and he had moved back to Idaho, and he came and asked if he could, first asked if he could, I think it was when her first bond was going to come up. And that's when he asked us if we would put our house up for her bond.
And prior to asking for you to put up the bond, do you recall if he ever asked if he could live with you?
Yes, he did.
And what did you tell him?
Well, first it was like an overnight, if he could be overnight. And I was okay with an overnight, but I could not let him live with us. So we told him that our daughter was going to move in and there wouldn't be any room.
And then he'd ask you to consider putting up some bond money or putting up your property. Is that correct?
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. We're getting a little leading.
Sustained.
And I think you had previously indicated that he asked you about bond.
Yes.
Do you recall what he asked you in relation to that?
When he came in, he was quite upset, and he said he had to get her out of jail, and that he cried and said he said it was just killing her to be in jail, and could we put our house up for bond? And we asked him if he had family that could help him. He said no. And he mentioned another friend, I think. He said he couldn't help him. And we said we would think about it, and I think that was a Saturday. Sunday, we got a text from him, and he wanted to bring the bondswoman to our home and to meet her at our house that Sunday.
And did you in fact have another conversation with Chad
what a
about posting bond
shitbag.
or putting your property up?
Yes, there was 2 conversations. This was the first one.
And what did you ultimately end up deciding?
No.
Thank God.
During your
Chad wanted them to put up their house for Lori's bond. And look at him. He has no shame. That dude is evil. Look at his empty eye sockets. Creepy. Oh, could you put up your house? I don't have any family to help me. Get the fuck out of here, Chad.
Conversation with Chad regarding the bond.
Roberta.
Do you recall anything about the comment previously made about Lori's daughter dying coming up?
Yes, because I asked him, how many daughters does Lori have? And he said 1. And I said, well, when we met you, you told me she had a daughter that passed away. And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, yes, you did. And then when I asked him about the missing children, and he said it was a custody battle. So that's why I asked, how many daughters does she have? And then he denied telling me that.
Right? Jess?
Did you learn the name of Lori's daughter?
I only learned not through him. I didn't.
Have you since heard the name Tylee?
Yes.
Do you recall specifically talking to Chad about Tylee?
I did. When he asked about the
Poor
bond,
Tylee.
I was a little miffed that he had asked that. And so I thought, I'm asking you some questions. So I asked him, where are the children? And
man.
I asked him, where's Tylee? I said, she's a teenager. So I said, doesn't she want a life? And come out and say, I'm the missing girl. I want a job and a life and a boyfriend. And he just said, she didn't like people and she didn't like me.
Did something stick out about those statements?
He said didn't.
So he used the past tense.
He did.
Do you recall specifically talking to Chad about Tylee?
I did. When he asked about the bond, I was a little miffed that he
Why
had
did it
asked
do
that.
that?
And so I thought, I'm asking you some questions.
Why did it just play that over again? That was weird. Did you see it cut out?
And he just said,
Weird.
she didn't like people and she didn't like me.
Did something stick out about those statements?
He said, didn't.
That was weird.
So he used the past tense.
He did.
If it does it again, I'm going to freak out. I feel like it's a record player. Why did it repeat that?
And backing up a little bit.
Is it just
Do you
me?
recall a time in February of 2019 when Chad was at your residence?
Yes. He had come over. We were working on a bedroom floor and he came over, and as he was leaving, that's when he mentioned that he had a vision or such that Tammy was going to pass away. He didn't know how or when, but before her 50th birthday.
That was weird.
And do you recall around that same time Chad saying anything about Tammy and games on a computer?
Yes. He had told my husband and I that Tammy liked to play some games on the computer, and that he had told her that her grandmother, I think, but she was dead, had come to him and told him to tell her that she was not happy with Tammy on the computer, that she was wasting her time on the computer.
Wait, what? Wait, what did he say?
All a time in February of 2019 when Chad was at your residence?
Yes. He had come over. We were working on a bedroom floor, and he came over, and as he was leaving, that's when he mentioned that he had a vision or such that Tammy was going to pass away. He didn't know how or when, but before her 50th birthday.
And do you recall around that same time Chad saying anything about Tammy and games on a computer?
Yes. He had told my husband and I that Tammy liked to play some games on the computer, and that he had told her that her grandmother, I think, but she was dead, had come to him and told him to tell her that she was not happy with Tammy on the computer, that she was wasting her time on the computer.
When Chad made the comment about Tammy going to die, did Tammy have any health issues that you were aware of?
No, in
What
fact,
the
I
fuck?
kind of just passed it off. I didn't really take it serious, honestly, because she wasn't.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay.
Weird. Your grandmother's aunts, great-grandmother's cousins, sisters, great-great-grandmother told me they're not happy with your behavior. What?
All right. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge.
This ought to be interesting.
Ms. Gilbert, can you tell me how often on a weekly basis you would see Tammy Daybell
We had our meetings on Wednesday mornings, and then I would see her on Sunday.
at church?
Yeah.
So, and how long were the meetings on Wednesday morning?
Oh, an hour to 2 hours.
Okay. And how many people were present at that meeting when you would see her for those Wednesday meetings?
There were 4 of us.
Okay. And that was about for 2 hours.
That was the longest.
Okay. That was a long meeting?
That was the longest we went.
Oh, the longest you go. Okay. And then as far as church is concerned, did you sit next to each other at church?
No, sometimes in our second meeting, we sat by each other because it was our presidency, but not in the first meeting.
Okay. So church would last about how long on a Sunday?
2 hours.
Okay. So you would see her for about 3 to 4 hours a week?
Yeah.
Would that be fair? Okay. And then after the birth of Emma's child, the Daybell family would sit at the back of the church. Is that right? You recall that?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
World.
So the location of where they would sit, generally, do you recall that they would sit in the front of the church in the beginning?
Not quite in the front, maybe the middle.
Okay. And then after Emma's child was born, they would, out of respect, they
Sometime,
moved to
yeah.
the back. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, do you have any recollection of Chad spending mornings at the Salem church every morning with his truck parked up there?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
Do you have any information about Chad parking his truck up at the Salem church every morning
On Sunday morning?
every morning? during
Oh,
the
no, I have
week?
no idea every
Okay.
morning.
And you do understand that Tammy's family was from Springville, right?
Yes,
And so it wouldn't have been particularly unusual for Tammy to have a service in Springville out of respect to her family over there, correct?
no, and I didn't.
Okay. You made mention of something about our presidency, and my notes say Bishop provided a meal. Talk to me about that a little bit.
So the four of us in our Relief Society presidency, and I had contacted the bishop, and he wanted to be part of that. So us three sisters now in the Relief Society provided the meal, and the bishop included in on that.
And then my notes say the 26th of October is the date that Chad mentioned that he met Lori when he was talking with you, and he mentioned that he met Lori Vallow at a conference in St. George, Utah.
Right.
And that was sometime in very late of 2018, right?
I believe that conference was
Okay.
in 2018.
And you mentioned that the way you knew Lori Vallow was through a person by the name of Melanie Gibb.
Right.
And you know Melanie Gibb as someone who's deeply involved in the Preparing the People movement and those sort of organizations,
He
right?
hates her.
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence. Counsel's testifying.
Counsel's still
How do you
testifying.
know Melanie Gibb?
I don't know how we came upon her podcast, and I was trying to remember how we knew of her podcast, but I didn't know Lori, and so we just wanted to listen to Melanie's.
Oh my
And
God.
then that's where I heard of Lori is through on her podcast.
So did you know of Melanie through the fact that she had a podcast, or did you know her through her participation in the Preparing the People movement?
I just knew her through the podcast.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, you mentioned that Chad talked to you about taking all of the kids to Disneyland. Is it possible they said Knott's Berry Farm?
I heard Disneyland.
Okay. Okay.
Freaking Disneyland. What?
Have you been to Chad's house?
Yes.
Okay. And is it fair to say that it's a one-story house?
There's an addition to the house.
Right.
You walk through a breezeway, and then there's stairs that goes up.
Right. And when you say an addition, it's more of a building that's.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Witness has already said.
Sustained.
Okay. Are you aware that attachment to the back of the house doesn't have any electric?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Are you aware that the attachment to the house that build on doesn't have any heat?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Facts not in evidence. Move to strike.
Counsel's
Sustained.
still
Mr. Pryor,
testifying.
It's got to be questioning, not just testimony through your question.
Well, Judge, I'm asking her if she's aware.
Well, I know, but there's a proper way to do that with facts from the witness, not from you.
Ooh.
Do you have you been in that addition that's attached to the house?
I have.
Okay. Do you have any information about what utilities are available in that building?
I don't. I didn't look
Okay.
at that
Okay.
part.
And are you aware that nobody uses that?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying or attempting to testify. Move to strike.
Sustained.
Counsel's still testifying.
Do you have any knowledge about any of the family members utilizing any of that portion of the addition?
I knew that Garth had a ham radio set up, and I think a drum set.
Okay.
there.
Ham radio and a drum
I don't
set?
know on their living conditions.
Okay.
Go Garth.
Were
Party
you
on,
aware of the
Garth.
living conditions in the primary residence?
I just knew of where Tammy's room was at.
Okay. And that's Chad's room as well?
I assume so.
Okay. And then in the other bedroom would be whose room?
I don't know which rooms the kids, whose room was what.
Okay. At the time of Tammy's passing, do you know who was living in the residence at the time?
I believe Garth was.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm not sure if Seth was or not.
Okay.
He could have been.
Okay. And then obviously you previously mentioned something about Emma living kitty corner from the house, right?
Right. And then Mark was coming home from his mission, so he would have lived there, but
Okay.
not yet.
And the other daughter lives somewhere in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you indicated that Chad openly spoke to you about the Disneyland, discussed it with you openly, right?
Yeah, just that they were going to take the kids to Disneyland.
Okay. So at around the time of October, when I believe these discussions were in October, right?
Right.
He wasn't trying to hide his whereabouts in any way, was he?
He didn't with us.
And he wasn't trying to conceal where he was going on trips and vacations, correct?
No, not with us. He didn't.
And he openly discussed with you his plans for the future, correct?
That he was going to go to Hawaii and write a book.
And did you get the impression from Chad when he was talking about the children, that he felt the children were still alive?
I didn't know of missing children then.
Okay, well, that wasn't really my question. My question was, at the time he was talking to you about the children, did she?
Easy,
Okay,
Prior.
I'm sorry, ma'am. It's okay. I know this is
Easy.
nerve-wracking.
I'm not sure which time.
Okay, it's okay. But at the time, you've had discussions with Chad about the children. Based on his demeanor, did you get the impression that he felt the children were still alive?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
I felt like he was avoiding it. I didn't get I couldn't get a straight answer.
Okay. So when he told you that when the truth comes out and that you felt it was a custody case, that didn't give you the impression that when the truth came out, it was a custody case, that the children's whereabouts would be told to everybody?
That's what he told me, but I
Okay.
was confused.
Okay,
from
it's
the other.
okay. Judge, that's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
For God's sakes, Prior. Okay, let's fast forward to her husband. Here is Mr. Gilbert. I can't even believe that these two entertained listening to Lori's podcast after their friend Tammy passes mysteriously. He gets married. Hey, I'm in love with this lady and I'm marrying her. And let's listen to her podcast. I'd be like, what? Here is Mr. Gilbert.
All right, at this time, then the witness has been sworn. Mr. Gilbert, before we proceed with testimony, I want to inquire as to whether or not you have watched any of the trial, either online or through any news media outlet or here in person in court.
I have not.
Okay. Have you discussed with anyone else their trial testimony?
No.
Okay. Thank you for your responses. You can inquire on direct, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Todd Gilbert, Toddgilbert.
Do you know an individual named Chad Daybell?
Yes, I do.
And did you know an individual named Tammy or Tamara Daybell?
Yes.
How did you know them?
In 2015, I heard of Chad Daybell. He was an author and wrote books, and that's how I heard of him, and that he was an author.
Had you read some of his books?
Yes,
And did you read those books before you ever actually met Chad in person?
most of them, yes.
And then did you end up relocating?
Yes. We moved into the Salem area in Chad's neighborhood around March of 2017.
Did you meet Chad in person at that time?
Yes,
And did you also meet Tammy in person?
yes.
And outside of Chad being an author, how did you come to meet them?
We were in the same ward with him, the same neighborhood, and so within a week, I believe we met him at church and introduced ourselves, and that's how it started off right there.
Out of Tammy and Chad, would you say there was one of them that you knew better or spent more time with?
Yes, Chad.
And how often would you see Chad?
Probably on the average about once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on time of year and that.
And was that generally at church?
Yes,
Did you see him at times outside of church?
yes. Sometimes I'd see him on his lawn, or sometimes he had me come over and help him do some plumbing stuff.
And we talked about that you'd read some of Chad's books. Did Chad ever discuss his religious beliefs or his purported beliefs with you?
Yes, a little bit sometimes. They didn't ring true with me on everything. I thought, well, I had no reason to doubt him, but maybe they happened to him and things that he was going to see in the area and that. So
And when you talk about things he was going to see, are those oftentimes referred to as visions?
yes,
And did you talk to Chad about some of the books he had written?
yes,
And did he share with you whether those were fictional or non-fictional?
yes. He also wrote children's books earlier. I didn't read any of them, but he wrote a couple of different series. And I'd read the first series and the second series, and he was in the process of finishing the second series in 2019. And so we did discuss a lot of the different events that he had in the books, both series.
And was it your understanding that all those events were fictional?
Yes, they were fictional based on his dreams, visions, near-death experience.
So part of the books were based on his visions, at least.
Yes,
And then part of them was fictional,
right.
was your understanding.
Yes, that's what I understood.
When Chad would talk with you about his beliefs, did it feel like he was trying to teach you or just share them with you?
A lot of times we would just kind of talk about the events that he'd seen. At that point, he wasn't necessarily really trying to teach me anything. He was just talking about things in the future that was coming up.
And when we talked about church, what church is it?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And did the things Chad tell you always comport with standard LDS doctrine?
No.
And it sounded like you would be willing to listen to him when he would share these things with you. Is that fair?
Yes, I would listen to some of the stuff he had to say. It was interesting.
Did you hold all those same beliefs?
No.
Do you recall Chad coming to your residence around February of 2019?
Yes.
Do you recall anything about that visit that stood out to you?
Yes. Myself and my wife were working on a bedroom floor trying to get some old tile out so we could put some carpet in. And Chad sent me a text, said he wanted to come over and talk to us. So he came over and we were finishing up, and he talked about some other stuff and on the way out, he says, I don't know if I should say this to you, but I feel like I should tell you that Tammy's mission is going to come to an end, or her life mission, before her 50th birthday.
The hell?
At that time, did you know how old Tammy was?
No, I figured she was around 48, though, it seems like.
At some point, did you learn of Tammy's passing?
Yes.
Do you recall when you learned of her passing?
Yes, on the morning of October 19th, 2019, about 7 a.m., we received a phone call from Emma, Chad's daughter, and she was crying, and she said that her mom...
I'm going to object.
Oh.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
And did Emma seem upset to you?
Yes.
I think you indicated she was crying.
Yes.
At some point, did Chad take the phone?
Yes.
And at some point during that call, did you learn of Tammy's passing?
Yes.
Did you end up going to the Daybell residence that morning?
Yes, we did.
Do you recall approximately what time you would have gone over?
It was around 8:15 a.m. in the morning.
When you got to the residence, did you make any observations of Chad?
Yes. When we walked in the living room, all of his children were there except for Mark, which was on a mission.
This is weird.
I'm not sure if his second daughter was there. And they were all sitting on the couch.
Smoke them if
and
you
Chad
got them.
He didn't seem like he was real sad like I would expect somebody to be after their spouse who just passed on. He seemed kind of businesslike to me, I thought, and I thought that was kind of strange. And I know Chad's demeanor was a little hard to figure out because he's soft-spoken. So sometimes it was hard to tell if he was crying. So that's how it looked to me that morning.
And you said you arrived there around 8:15, you believe?
Yes.
We do, Kels. We do,
So,
Kels.
Tammy had just been pronounced dead shortly before that. Was that your understanding?
That's what we understand, yes.
Do you recall Chad making any statements to you that day or having a conversation with him?
Yes, I was talking to him about it a little bit, and I said to him, I'd forgot that what he had told me in February about Tammy passing. I said to him, well, it looks like it must have happened. And he said, yes, it did. And
By true
he kind of
crime.
turned his back away from the children, which were sitting on the couch. And he says that they didn't really know about it. They hadn't heard of it before he hadn't told them.
And when you say they hadn't heard of it and he hadn't told them, is that referring to his vision that Tammy was going to pass away?
Yes.
2 extra spots for everyone who uses the tip.
Do you recall
line.
if Chad told you anything regarding how Tammy had died?
Yes, I asked him if he had any idea of what happened to her, and he says that she got up around midnight. She had a big coughing spell, and she also threw up, and that she went back to bed. And then he told me that he figures she died around 2 a.m.
He knows.
From an embolism or something like that. I don't know how he knew that, and that about 5:30, she rolled her weight of her body. I guess she rolled out of bed onto the floor partially, and he hollered for Gar to come and help her come and help lift her back on the bed.
Get it, Flo.
So he told you it was believed the time of death was around 2 a.m.
Yes.
And then he indicated to you that 3 to 4 hours later, she rolled out of bed?
Yes.
Had you had an opportunity prior to Tammy's passing to observe her?
Yes, several occasions. We would see her shopping at Walmart. She'd look fine, talk fine. We'd see her at church.
Judge, I'm going to
a
be
lot.
at this point. It's becoming a narrative.
Oh,
Overruled.
You can continue.
We would see her at church at least once a week. See her out in the yard when we was driving by, turning the corner, and she looked fine.
And you say she looked fine. Did you ever notice anything with regard to her appearing to have failing health?
No,
Were you ever able to make observations of Chad and Tammy together?
yes.
What did you observe about their interactions with each other?
When we first moved into the Salem area, I was assigned as a home teacher for the church to go to his home. And usually him and Tammy would be sitting on the couch and they were holding hands and seemed like a good couple. And then at church, it was a lot the same. When we first moved into the ward, they were pretty well halfway up to the front or even closer to the front. I did notice as time went on in 2019, start of 2019 to Tammy's death, that they were slowly moving towards the back like they were trying to hide or didn't want to be seen, or their demeanor seemed to be a little separate from each other.
And in relation to you and Chad talking, at any point did he decrease in telling you about his beliefs or different things like that?
Yes, that was about the same time, beginning of 2019 and to 2018. He was harder to find him at church, I guess, to asking, anything, and he told me that, the preparation world was slowing down a little bit. People were kind of tired of it, didn't want to know as much. And so there just wasn't as much going on. And he was harder to, I guess, corner to talk to.
And going back to October 19th, did you leave and come back to the residence that day, to the Daybell residence?
Yes. Well, after we'd been there a while, we asked Chad if the family would like breakfast. So we went to the McDonald's in Rexburg and got breakfast and brought it back to him. And when we arrived, there was more people there then. And so Gar said just to leave it on the kitchen table there. So that's where we left it.
welcome back, Michael.
At some point, do you recall having a conversation with Chad about what his plans were in relation to staying in the residence?
Yes. The day after the funeral, the same night that they had the memorial, I believe it was on a Wednesday night, we took him dinner over there around 6, I believe. And after talking to him for a minute, he said, I've got to move out. I can't stay here anymore. And so I asked him where he was going to move to. And he said he has a friend over on Pioneer Road in Rexburg that had an apartment that's not there all the time. And that he was going to move in with that person, which I figured was a man at the time.
And did Chad ever provide you the name of who he was going to move in with?
No, he didn't.
And you talked about that being after Tammy's memorial. Do you recall when her memorial was?
Yeah, it was the Wednesday after Tammy died. I can't remember exactly what date.
And do you recall that Tammy died on a Saturday?
Yes.
Did you attend her funeral?
Yes, we did.
And do you recall when her funeral was?
It was the following Tuesday, which was the 22nd, I believe.
And do you recall where the funeral was?
Yes, in Springville, Utah.
Did anything strike you as odd about the timing of the funeral?
Yes, it seemed like things were way hurried fast. Going back to when Tammy died, when we were there, we asked him about the funeral, and we figured it was going to be a few more days. And the following Tuesday, that seemed real odd, like somebody had been thinking ahead of time.
Judge, I'm going to
Oh, shit.
speculation.
Overruled.
You can continue.
That seemed real fast to have a funeral for your spouse that you were in love with. And so it just seemed real fast to us and odd.
And in attending the funeral, did you make any observations of Chad?
Yes, when we arrived there, we went in, and it was before it started, so we went in the viewing area, and Chad and his children are in there along with relatives on both sides of the family, and he was standing by the casket, and he seemed okay. He looked okay. We talked to him for a minute or two and looked at Tammy in the casket, and we felt like we needed a closure with Tammy because we'd known her, and that he just seemed like he was in a hurry to get it over with, kind of like, I guess you might say.
Thank you so much, Helen, and welcome,
And
Brian
then we
and
talked
Joe.
about when you got back, you went to his residence after the memorial. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you attend the memorial?
No, we did not.
And it's at that time that he let you know he was going to be moving out?
Yes.
Sometime after that, did you and your wife make contact with Chad?
Yes, I believe it's the following Saturday or somewhere in that area. we thought, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to run over and see how he's doing and take a pizza to him. So we gave him a call about 5:30 p.m. and he said, well, maybe I'll just have him come over and see you guys at your house. So like he didn't want us to come over to his place. So that's how we lined it up.
And did he in fact end up coming to your residence?
Yes, he got there about 6 o'clock.
And when he arrived at the residence, did you end up having a conversation with him?
Yes, he come in and my wife had just got done making some cookies. So he sit down at the table and we were kind of standing there just chatting, how he was doing. He wanted to know how we were doing. And then he seemed a little hesitant. He says, I need to tell you something. And he says, I have a girlfriend. And of course we about fell on the floor, but, and
yeah, then they fist pumped him.
I kind of felt like he was a little hesitant to tell us and like he was going to have to prod him to say who it was. But then he said her name was Lori Ballo. And
then he showed a picture and they gave him another fist pump.
Before. And then I thought of a podcast that I'd heard her on.
God's sake.
Had you ever met Lori Ballo in person?
Not at that time.
And this occurred approximately a week or a little less than a week after Tammy was pronounced dead?
Yes, it's probably about a week and a half.
Did he end up telling you anything else about his girlfriend other than her name?
Yes, he said that that Tammy's mission was basically over with this earth life, and so his second half of his life was supposed to be with Lori, and that she was going to help him do his mission, and that she was beautiful and
oh my God, I can't.
like that.
He laughed. Oh,
and was Lori was not with him on that occasion, is that right?
They were all lusting over her. They were
at
all
some point, did you end up meeting
her.
Lori?
Yes, well, Chad was still there. He says that Lori and her friends were going to be in the area and that would we like to meet her? And we said, yes, we would. And so we worked in the Rexburg temple.
Was that before or after he showed her pictures from Miss Texas pageant? Thank you so much, Shell. Welcome, Miss K. I mean, what the hell is that?
On Tuesdays, we had the night shift. And Chad said that
Tuesdays.
Him and her, or Lori, and a couple of her friends were going to be in the temple doing some work that afternoon. And they tried to meet us.
She's bringing her friends.
And did you, in fact, end up meeting them at the temple?
Yes.
Oh.
So the first time you met Lori in person, she was at the temple with Chad?
Yes.
Her friends are going to be at the temple. Let's go down to the temple, guys.
At a later
They're
time,
really cute.
Do you recall Chad and Lori coming to your residence?
Yes, it was 2 or 3 days after that, I believe.
And when they came to your residence, did you end up having a conversation with them?
Yes.
Do you recall what they told you?
They, when they first come in, they were real happy, excited, kind of like with each other. So we invited them in, come sit on the couch. They ended up sitting real close to each other, holding hands.
He's
and
giggling.
One thing we thought was strange, I seen Chad rubbing her leg, and I thought to myself, that's kind of odd. Your first wife has died within a week and a half, and you're
rubbing her leg,
carrying on kind of like a teenager sitting there that's first in love.
He's rubbing her leg in the temple?
Had you ever seen him act like that with Tammy?
No.
Do you recall them talking to you about their plans for a future together?
Yes, they said that they were going to eventually end up in Hawaii. And I guess Lori had already lived over there, so they were going to go back to Hawaii and live permanently after they got things all wrapped up here.
All wrapped up.
Do you recall if they indicated their plan to be together?
Yes, they were planning on being together, eventually get married.
And do you recall if there was any conversation regarding Lori's former spouse?
Yes, while they were there, we asked him, the normal stuff you'd ask people when they come visit you the first time. Have you been married before? She said, yes, she had.
Is that normal in the temple?
Her husband had died of a heart attack in December 2018 is what she told us.
Do you recall any conversations or statements made regarding Lori's daughter?
Yes, we asked her if she had any children. She said that she had had several. And Chad kind of popped up and said that she had a daughter that had just died.
Good Lord.
So we didn't know what to think of that.
When Chad mentioned that Lori had a daughter that had just died, did Lori say anything different?
No, she didn't say anything.
Do you recall if either of them ever mentioned Lori having a minor son?
No, I can't recall anything of that.
And after that visit, do you recall them coming to your residence on another occasion?
Yes, they came back, what was it, probably about the second week in November, I believe, 2019, after they had got married. Why? And they kind of stopped in just to see us, and they wanted to show us all of their wedding pictures, which we thought was quite a few. And so then then they talked about
Nobody
how they
cares,
planned
Chad and Lori.
a family trip with Chad's children, the ones that were here, and yeah, all of his children, to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm around Thanksgiving time.
Did they ever mention taking Lori's
Jill?
children with them on
No.
that trip?
Nope.
And they shared with you their wedding photos?
Yes.
Did you learn when they had gotten married?
We was informed probably a week before that they had got married on the 5th of November.
In those wedding photos they shared with you, did you ever see a teenage girl?
No.
Ever see a minor boy?
Nope.
Did you see Alex Cox in those pictures?
No.
Have you met Melanie Gibb before?
Yes.
Did you see her in those pictures?
No.
Who was in the pictures?
Just Chad and Lori.
Did you ever have occasion to talk with Chad about how his kids felt about Lori?
Yes. When we would see him, he would already kind of bring it up himself that they were fine with Lori, that Tammy had appeared to him in spirit, I don't know, at least twice.
That thing
and
never
said
works
that
for me.
she was doing fine and that she understood the plan, that she was going to move on in the spirit world, and then that Chad's mission was to be married to Lori, and that his children were basically becoming fine with that thing, which seemed odd to us, but
Seemed odd to us. That's the only
And he
thing.
specifically indicated Tammy had come to him in a vision or something,
yes,
and she'd indicated she was fine with everything.
yes.
After that visit around Thanksgiving, did Chad ever, or I think it was a little before Thanksgiving, did Chad ever return to your residence at a later time?
I can't say for sure, but it seems like it. There was about 3 different times.
And I think you said that your understanding was Chad and Lori's plan was to eventually move to Hawaii permanently.
Yes.
Did some additional visits happen before they moved?
Not that I can recall. The last time we seen him was before Thanksgiving.
And after they'd moved, at some point, did Chad end up coming to your residence?
Yes, he came to our residence after Lori was brought back to Rexburg and after he got back into the area.
And do you recall why Chad came to your residence?
Yes, I remember that when he walked in the door, he says that the Christ had sent me here to ask you guys if you would be willing to put your home up for bond to get Tammy out of jail.
Christ asked me.
Not Tammy, excuse me, Lori out of jail.
Wow.
Did you end up agreeing to do that?
No, there's a lot more things that had to be figured out before that was going to happen.
Dude, why
And
would you
do
even
recall
consider
being
that?
present for a conversation regarding the statement Chad had previously made about Lori's daughter?
Yes.
And what do you recall hearing Chad say?
I remember him saying that she didn't really like him too much and that so she would kind of stay away from him. She was like a typical college student.
Typical college.
And have you been to the Daybell residence before?
Yes.
Are there stairs somewhere in the residence?
There is one set that lead up to a room in the back part of the home.
I have no further questions.
All right. That'll conclude the direct. We can go ahead. Let's go ahead and begin with cross. I think, Mr. Pryor, where we're at. Yeah.
Here we go with cross. So when we...
Good afternoon, Mr. Gilbert.
Good afternoon.
So the last question the prosecutor asked you was about a part of the house that has stairs.
Yes.
You're familiar with the Daybell house, correct?
Yes.
The brick part of the house is a one-story building. Is that fair?
Correct.
And then on the back is an attached building that has some stairs, it's almost like an attached garage. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence. Counsel's testifying. Move to strike.
How would you describe that attached building?
Uh-oh. What happened?
The mechanical room in the bottom, storage room in the bottom, and then just a room up above it.
And to your knowledge, did anybody ever use that for sleeping quarters?
I believe Garth might have once in a while.
It wasn't used for anything else but storage. Would that be fair?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony. Move to strike.
Sustained.
Garth may have used it once. Is that correct? Or a couple of
Objection,
times?
Your Honor, misstates the testimony. Move to strike.
Sustained.
The attached building that you're talking about, who used the building?
It looked like the whole family used the building to me. They had a ham radio up there.
Okay.
Set of drums.
They had a ham radio.
To your knowledge, was there ever a bedroom set up there?
There was a bed.
Okay. Was there ever a desk or any office
I
furniture?
told him to
Not
go
that
to
I'd
bed,
seen.
Computer?
and he did.
Nope.
No kind of organized office up there?
No.
Okay. And do you know whether or not there was utilities available to that room up there?
I do not believe there was heat up there, so I don't think so other than power.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned the name Melanie Gibb a couple of times. You recognized her through some sort of a podcast. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is that something that occasionally you would listen to one of her podcasts?
Yes.
And is she someone who is involved in anything, any organization attached to the LDS faith?
No, not that I'm aware of.
She does something. Are you familiar with the term preparing the people?
Yes.
And then she's involved in that organization.
To my knowledge, not really.
How do you, other than the podcast, how do you know Melanie Gibb?
When they had the Preparing the People conference up here in Caldwell, Idaho, over here, that in February 2019, we went over there and Chad introduced me to her.
Okay. Did you know Melanie Gibb from any other occasion?
I'd never met her. I just heard her.
And she spoke at that conference?
Yes, I believe so.
And on the subject of speaking at conferences, were you aware of Chad ever making statements at any of his conferences about Tammy's health or whether he has any predictions about her demise?
No, I never did hear him publicly say that in any of the conferences.
Okay. And did you have an occasion to attend these conferences somewhat regularly?
We attended 3 of them.
Okay. And the term avow came across as part of my research. Do you know what the term avow is?
Yes, it stands for, it's a website. I can't remember what avow stands for now.
Okay. Is it linked to this preparing the people stuff?
No.
It has
It is a preparation website.
It is not, or it is?
It is.
It's a preparation website. And when we're talking about preparation, that's not necessarily anything that's inconsistent with the LDS faith, correct?
No.
I mean, there's no limitation through your faith saying you can't participate in this preparation stuff, right?
No.
And Chad was an active member in the LDS faith throughout the time you've known him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the writing of these fiction books doesn't necessarily preclude him from being a part of his LDS faith. Is that fair?
No.
Okay. And he is entitled to his opinion as to how he would express what he believes versus what maybe someone else in the LDS faith would believe, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You made mention of meeting at the temple and meeting Lori Vallow.
Yes.
I don't know the limitations of your faith, so that's why I'm asking this question. When you go to the temple, is there a limitation as to who's allowed to go to this temple?
Well, yes, you have to be basically an active member and have a temple recommend to get in the temple.
And you get to go in there and
what's a
rub
temple
legs.
recommend?
That's where you go see your bishop, which is over the ward, and he asks you a set of questions to see if you are basically living the gospel.
Okay. So when you went to the temple, you saw Lori Vallow there. Who else was there?
There was Melanie Boudreau, and I can't recall the other lady.
Okay.
The other lady.
Now,
One of Lori's gal friends.
was it, are you aware if it was Lori Vallow who told Chad Daybell Tylee didn't like him?
No, it seemed like that's just what Chad said.
Okay. And you mentioned that Chad is a soft-spoken person.
Yes.
He's not a dynamic personality, is he?
No.
Somewhat shy?
It looks that way, yeah.
Reserved?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the family was planning a trip to Knott's Berry Farm first you said Disneyland and Knott's Berry.
Heard both.
And this was in the second week of November, correct?
Right.
What?
That's when you met with Chad?
That's when they come over the second time to.
Why did
Okay,
do
so
that
it
again?
wasn't a secret that they were planning on going on a vacation with the family to Knott's Berry Farm. That wasn't any kind of a
I
secret,
don't
right?
believe so.
The common knowledge.
Yeah.
And that had been planned. You said the second week of November. Could we be more specific about the time or date, or you just don't remember?
I don't recall. I would say it was about a week after they got married.
Okay.
Him and Lori, that is.
So would it be fair to say that by the second week of November, there were already plans in place to go on this family vacation?
Well, I would think they probably had plans then.
Right.
Yes,
And when we say the second week of November, are we talking like the 14th of November?
possibly.
Okay. And Judge, if I could just have a minute.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Just a moment, he says. Dumbbell.
Oh, yeah.
He's an
So
idiot.
when you spoke to Chad,
They go and rub
about
legs
the,
in the temples.
the circumstances surrounding Tammy's death, he mentioned to you that she had a coughing spell that night, right?
Correct.
And he mentioned to you that she had been vomiting.
Yes.
Did he say what she may have eaten that was causing her to vomit that night?
No.
Okay. And then there was some discussion about some sort of an embolism, or there was something with her head that went wrong. Is that fair?
He didn't say head. He just said embolism.
Okay. Okay. And then there was a discussion with Chad that when they discovered Tammy in the morning, that he called out to Garth. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And so that's what he told you,
Yes,
right?
that's what he said.
And then he also told you that when he called out to Garth and Chad had to pick Tammy up off the floor and put her back into the bed. Is that what you were
That's the way I understood it.
Okay. Okay, Judge, I don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
All right. Blake, if you'd like to redirect, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, it's still the husband. We're going to skip over the recross though. So we're going to go now to Miss Janice Olson. Miss Janice Olson worked with Miss Janice Olson is going to be next. She worked with Tammy Daybell at the school. Tammy was a librarian, and this lady was a teacher there.
I swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yeah. Obviously.
Shell likes Pryor. Isn't it funny? Alex
All right, thank
had
you.
pink
Now that the
phone.
witness has been sworn, I just need to inquire because of an exclusionary order in the case that doesn't allow for witnesses to view testimony. This trial has been live streamed and open to the public. Ms. Olson, have you observed any of the trial since it started?
No.
Okay. Have you discussed with anyone else testimony they've given in the trial?
No.
Okay. Thank you for your responses, Mr. Wixom. You may go ahead and inquire on direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state your full name and spell it for the record, please?
Janice Olson, Janiceolson.
Thank you. And
She's
where do you
nervous.
Just a little out of St. Anthony,
live? And where is that relative to Salem, Idaho?
about 12, 15 miles away.
And what do you do for work?
I teach first grade.
How long have you taught first grade?
This will be my 30th year.
And have you always taught at the same school?
Yes.
Which school is that?
Central Elementary
And where is that school?
in Sugar City.
And I want to draw your attention back to October of 2019. Do you recall working with Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury at work, how often did you have interaction with Tammy?
All day. We're just kind of in and out of our classrooms, in the hall, the lunchroom, in our teacher's workroom.
She sounds nervous.
So is it fair to say you saw her multiple times a day?
Yeah. Yes.
And you said the lunchroom. Did you ever have occasion to have lunch with her?
Yes.
How often do you think that would happen?
3, 4 times a week.
If you were to think about the working relationship you had with her, how would you describe that relationship?
She was a friend, good colleague.
And when you interacted with her at school, did you have any chance or opportunity to observe her activity or her work?
Yes.
What did you observe about her?
She was very organized, on top of things. She always went the extra mile to get books into kids' hands and to make sure we knew what was in the library. And
Did you ever, I'll withdraw that. Where is the library in the school?
down the hall, you walk in, and you just go straight down the hall and to the left, just after the lunchroom.
How would Tammy go and get students and bring them to the library? What did she have to do?
She would actually stay in the library. Well, she'd come around and gather books during the week if you had library that day. But then when it was our library time, we'd take our class down, drop them off at the library, pick them back up after they were done.
Outside of school, did you ever were you ever involved in any activities with Tammy?
Yes.
What activities were those?
She came to our high fit / Zumba class a couple times a week.
How often? Twice a week, you say?
Mhm.
How long is each class?
An hour.
Drawing again your attention back to October of 2019, I'm going to ask you just to speak of the last couple of months before that time. Was Tammy a regular attender of the class?
Yes.
And when you went to class, did you have the opportunity to observe her in class?
Yes.
And what did you observe her doing in the class typically?
Just following along, just like everybody else.
Did you ever notice whether or not she seemed to struggle in the class?
No.
Did she ever fall behind?
No.
Did she ever quit early?
No. Usually if she thought it was too hard, I mean, everybody does it. If they're out of wind for a second, they stop and march, or they just keep moving and then join back up.
Did she ever do that?
Very well.
I don't recall if she did, but I'm sure we all do.
So just based on those observations, did you make any observations about Tammy's health or fitness level?
Yeah, she was active and healthy.
Did you eventually learn of Tammy's death?
Yes.
How did you learn of her death?
I had a student in my class whose mother worked with her in her church calling.
And how did you learn?
Oh, sorry. She called me that morning to tell me.
What was your reaction when you had learned of her death?
Shock.
Why shock?
Because I'd just seen her on Friday and she was fine and she was at exercise class that week.
When you say you had just seen her on Friday, which Friday are you talking about?
Well, the Friday at school, the day before, it was just Friday at school, and then they got called Saturday morning. So
are we talking about the Friday before she passed away on Saturday?
Yes.
And you said you'd seen her there?
Yes.
Had you interacted with her that much that day?
I'm sure I did.
Did she ever mention anything that day to you about not feeling well?
No.
Did she ever mention anything about her health at all there?
No.
Did you notice her to have any kind of symptoms or appear to not be feeling well?
No.
Generally speaking, was Tammy the type of personality, did she ever complain about things?
No.
Do you recall her ever complaining about health matters at all?
No.
Again, focused on that last couple of months before she passed, did you ever observe whether or not Tammy had made any significant gains or decreases in weight?
I haven't. I didn't.
So is it fair to say she appeared to stay at the same weight?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Just briefly, Judge, thank you. So if I understand your testimony, Ms. Olson, is it true that the children were brought to Tammy for exercising their library time?
Yes.
So Tammy would not have to walk to the other end of the school to pick up the children and then walk them back every day, right?
Oh, come
Correct?
on.
Correct.
In other words, the children were as part of their hour, I guess I don't know how this would work, but as part of their library hour, the teacher's responsibility were to gather up their students, walk them to the library, and then at the return of their hour, the teacher would go back to the library, pick up the students, and bring them back to their class. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Friday before Tammy passed away. As part of her duties as the librarian, that day was particularly busy that Friday because do you recall that she was trying to get all of the boxes and books together for the book fair?
Objection, counsel is testifying, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Do you have any recollection of Tammy preparing for a book fair that Friday?
No, I don't.
Okay. Nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Redirect, Mr. Wixom.
Just a couple of questions, please. Ma'am, can you please explain for the jury, where was your classroom relative to the library in the school?
I'm right by the front doors, just as you come inside to the left.
So related to the library, where is that?
Well, I'm here, and you would go down the hall around the lunchroom, and she'd be just the first doors on the left.
Would it be fair to say that it'd be possible that Tammy could be walking around to the school and you wouldn't?
Goes beyond school.
On those grounds, it's just for speculation, Mr. Wixom, so I'll sustain an objection there.
Did you ever see Tammy walking around in school at all?
All day, every day.
When would you see her walking? What would she be doing?
she'd be coming to gather up the books before we made it to library for each class.
Boom.
She would be passing out books. If I had said I'm teaching about insects or something, she would gather up some really good insect books that she had in the library and bring them to our classes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wixom. Mr. Wixom, would there be any need to recall this witness?
There is not, Your Honor.
Will the defense call the witness? Okay, if you're here under subpoena, you're released from the subpoena. Thank you for appearing and testifying in trial.
Thank you.
You can be excused.
Is she the last witness? No, we have one more.
All right, Ms. Ballard, you've been placed under oath. I just want to inquire before you testify. This case has been live streamed on the court's channel as well as open to the public to view the trial proceedings. Have you observed any of the trial testimony that's taken place since the trial started?
No, sir.
All right. And have you talked to anyone else about testimony they have given at trial?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you for your responses. Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to inquire, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, will you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Taylor Ballard, Taylor Ballard.
And where do you live?
Rexburg, Idaho.
What do you do for work?
I'm a health insurance broker at Ballard Insurance Group.
How long have you been an insurance broker?
14 years.
Is that something that requires a license from the state?
It is.
Can you just briefly explain to the jury the difference between an insurance broker and an agent?
An insurance agent represents one carrier, one health carrier or company, and an insurance broker represents several.
In your work, do you help people get medical insurance?
I do.
Is that something you've done for the entire 14 years?
Yes.
I now want to ask you, do you know Chad Daybell?
On a professional level.
When did you first become acquainted with him?
She had to make that
October 31st, 2019.
And how did you become acquainted with him?
He came into my office to inquire about an individual health policy for him and his children.
And were you able to help him with that?
Yes.
Did he explain why he needed the insurance?
I was already aware he had been referred to us. He was losing coverage that day from his deceased wife's policy through her employer plan, who we also administer.
So is it fair to say you weren't surprised by his inquiry?
Right.
And when you said he was inquiring about coverage for his children, did he tell you which children he was trying to cover?
Yes, it was Seth, Leah, and Mark.
At that point in time, did he make any inquiries about the possibilities of adding a spouse?
No.
And just very briefly, what, under most medical plans, what qualifications does a dependent have to meet to be able to be put on a parent or step-parent's policy?
On the individual market, which is what we were talking about, they need to be under 26, unmarried, and claimed as a tax dependent on the joint return.
So can a step-parent add a stepchild to their policy?
Yes.
And during that initial contact and that request about insurance information, what information did you need to gather from him to look at what policies you might be able to help with?
These particular policies that he was interested in are based on income to see if you can qualify for assistance. So we discussed income as well as demographic information for him and the children.
What information did he give you about income?
He stated that without his wife's income, now that she had passed away, his self-employment of a book publishing company would operate at a loss.
Did you do anything to verify that status of income?
At that time, it was just verbal.
Did you later request that he verify his income?
Yes.
And how did you request that verification come?
I went to Health and Welfare to apply him for the benefits, and their interface was showing that his self-employment was reporting at about $30,000 profit annually. So they stated we would need a copy of his tax return.
Did you eventually request a copy of the tax return?
Yes.
And we'll come back to that. So it sounds like that. It sounds like he initially told you he was operating at a loss, but you found out he was making $30,000 a year?
According to Health and Welfare's interface, yes.
Okay. And a moment ago, you also said in that conversation that you were gathering demographic information about the children.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, and when you do answer for the record, a yes or no, so the record will capture that. What demographic information were you gathering? What were you asking of him?
Children's names, birthdays, socials.
And so did he provide all that information with respect to the children he was trying to cover?
Yes.
After that particular meeting, when's the next time that you recall talking to him?
I texted him on November 5th, 2019, asking if he could provide a copy of his 2018 tax return.
Did he respond?
He did.
What did he say?
He responded that day saying he was out of town all week, but he would probably be able to stop by the following week.
Did he eventually produce the tax return?
Yes.
Okay. And then when's the next time you had contact with him?
November 21st, 2019.
And can you please explain the nature of that contact? Did you talk to him on the phone, text? Did he come in?
I reached out to him via text and then he came into my office.
And what was your purpose in texting him that day?
Based on the tax return that was provided, it was proven that his business did operate at a profit. And so therefore he was eligible for different insurance than we had previously discussed. So we discussed what his options would look like for January 2020.
And in that conversation, what do you recall him mentioning at that point?
He had asked me if he were to get married, how hard it would be to add the new wife.
And if he said that as a hypothetical?
Yes.
So he didn't tell you that he had been married?
Correct.
And what was your reaction to that?
I just told him that there's lots of variables and we could worry about that when we got to it if it happened.
In that conversation, did he ever later state that he had plans to marry?
When I responded with what I just told you, he said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll probably be married by the end of the year. So I'm just curious what the process looks like.
And both of these statements came on the 21st of November, correct?
Yes.
Whoa.
At that point in time, did the two of you discuss any other potential dependents?
No.
At that point in time, did you gather any additional information or submit any type of insurance application?
Not on the 21st, no.
During that conversation, at any point, did Chad ever mention to you the names JJ or Tylee?
No.
Okay. When's the next time you recall having interaction with him?
Bye, Jill.
December 11th, 2019.
And what was that occasion? Explain that to the jury, please.
He just wanted to make sure he was square for January of 2020. And so we discussed, he picked his plan and he paid for it.
Okay. So he actually applied for the plan on that date on December 10th?
In between the 21st and the 11th is when I had been doing the back work. And on the 11th, he was calling to follow up.
Did you have any conversations with him during that time frame?
Mm-mm.
Okay. At that point in time, when he picked his plan, did he pay a premium for the plan?
Yeah.
At that point in time, did he bring up the name JJ or Tylee?
No.
We came home.
Did he bring up the name Lori?
No.
When's the next time? Well, let me withdraw that. At any point in time after that,
He's like, I'm going to
did you ever
level with
receive
you.
any
I'm
mail at your
getting
office
married.
or Chad?
Yes.
What did you receive, the best you can recall?
We received 5 letters. I believe 2 of them were from Health and Welfare and 3 of them were from Select Health, which is the carrier that he chose. They were addressed to him, but they had our address on them.
Is that something that may typically happen in your business?
Never.
So clients never forwarded or used your address to have mail sent to it?
Never.
Did that strike you as normal, cause any questions for you?
It definitely was not normal. We weren't sure why that was happening because all of the applications that we took and all of the online systems showed the address he had provided me.
So what do you recall as the next interaction with Chad?
March 11th, 2020.
Do you recall any interaction with him during December?
Only when he called to make his payment.
At any point in time after he made his payment for his insurance, had you learned anything about JJ or Tylee?
Overall.
You may answer.
Yes.
What did you learn about them and when?
December 23rd of 2019, I was in Health and Welfare doing other business and it got brought up to me as if I was asked if I had heard about it yet.
Just generally speaking, what had you learned about JJ and Tylee?
That Chad had remarried someone who had 2 children and they were missing.
Yikes.
Did that cause you any concern at that point?
Yes.
What was the concern?
Well, I was just confused. I didn't know what to think of it because when they first mentioned that children were missing, I wondered if it was the children that I had helped him insure. And then it also made me question his deceased wife's.
In what way did you question that?
Can you ask me that again?
In what way did it make you question his deceased wife?
I was just curious of the timing. It just seemed fast.
Let me ask this. Did your office handle any insurance for Tammy before she passed?
Yes.
What insurance policies did your office handle for Tammy?
Health, life, disability.
So did you at any point in that time period look at any of Tammy's insurance policies?
Yes.
What did you look at?
I checked to see what her life insurance amount was and if it had been paid out yet.
And what did you find?
That it had been paid out and that her most recent open enrollment, which was in August for September 1st effective date, that she had upped it to the max.
Sad.
And is it normal for an insurance broker to look at those types of things?
Yes.
Why?
To make sure the beneficiaries are correct, to make sure that we have the right amounts on there since it has to do with their income, what they qualify for.
And I believe you were starting to try to explain, you did have a contact with Chad on was it the 1st of March or when was the next contact?
March 11th.
Thank you. Can you please describe to the jury what was the nature of that contact?
He had come into my office to inquire about getting health insurance for his wife.
At that point, did he tell you who his wife was?
Yes.
Who did he say?
He said her name was Lori Daybell, and he wrote her name on a sticky note, Lori Ryan Daybell.
Did he happen to mention to you when he had married her?
He said November 5th, 2019.
What was your reaction to his inquiry about adding his wife at that point?
Well, he had stated to me that he had stated to me that she was incarcerated, and so I told him she wouldn't necessarily need insurance right now, but he was worried about something happening to her, and I told him she would be covered under the state as long as she was incarcerated.
Did you have any further discussion about how to potentially insure her if she were to no longer be incarcerated?
Yes, when he told me the date of marriage, I told him that that was outside of the enrollment window. It had been longer than 60 days. He said that she should be getting out the following week, and I told him that we could use that as a qualifying event.
So was a plan made then at that point to do so if she became unincarcerated?
Yes.
Just the general nature of that conversation, was there anything unusual about that conversation?
He, no.
At any point in that conversation, did he ever bring up anything about his computer?
I was going through all of the information, confirming what was different and what was the same. And when we got to the income, he said, they confiscated my computer, so I haven't been able to pay myself yet.
And what was your reaction to that?
I said, they.
Okay. And did he explain who he's talking about?
He said, the FBI.
Did he say anything else to you about the situation in that conversation?
About the confiscation?
Yikes.
Just his personal situation generally.
What an
Just
idiot.
that he was wanting to make sure that he, his wife, and his son, Mark, would be covered.
And in that conversation, did you ask him any follow-up about adding dependents?
I did.
What did you ask him?
Back then, the application states, is there anyone else in your household, whether they need coverage or not? Is there anyone on your tax return, whether they need coverage or not? And so I just went through those normal questions.
And in that line of questioning with him, did he ever mention JJ or Tylee?
No.
Why did you go through the line of questions with him specifically? What was your reason?
That's what I would do with anybody. It's the questions that are on the application.
Having learned about JJ and Tylee's missing status, did that cause you any concern when you were processing this paperwork for Mr. Daybell at that point?
Yes.
What was the concern?
Just, I mean, it was all over the news that they were missing, and him saying that just validated that they were.
What about concerns relative to the insurance policy?
It made me think we may have a fraudulent life payout.
Explain that, please.
Yikes.
I was worried that Tammy's death may have not been an accident and that the life premiums may have been paid out when they shouldn't have been.
You said premiums, the life premiums?
Sorry, the life insurance money.
Now, relative to the health or medical insurance he was seeking at that time, did his lack of bringing anything up about JJ and Tylee cause concerns about that health insurance coverage?
Yes.
What was that concern?
To me, it seemed like they weren't going to need any insurance. All that he was asking about was him, Lori, and Mark.
What happened next?
Back then, everything used to take overnight to update. And so we parted ways that day, and I told him that I would reach out when the premium rates were ready the next day.
And did you do that?
Yes.
How did you do that?
In other words, you're getting
Text
arrested,
message.
boy.
Did he respond?
Yes.
How did he respond?
Text message.
Okay. Did you at some point talk to him again?
Yes.
What was the next conversation and when?
March 16th, he reached out to me. He had gotten some notices saying that his wife Lori's identity was not verifying. They were notices from the health and welfare saying we can't verify her information. Can you provide us with more?
Did he provide anything to you?
Yes.
What did he provide?
Their marriage certificate and her driver's license.
What happened next in terms of contact with Chad?
Between, let's see, that was March 16th. We talked again on March 18th, letting him know it was resolved.
Any further contact with him?
A few days later, he reached out about another notice that he received. I let him know that it was taken care of, and I think that was March 26th, and that was the last time I talked to him.
March 26th was the last time you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything come up in that conversation about his status or his dependence?
No, not about the dependents.
What did anything come up in the conversation at all?
I mean, yes, we small talked. He mentioned I told him to let me know if anything changed income wise or otherwise, and he said, I think it's going to be a pretty tight year. I don't see anything changing.
At any point, did you ever send any follow-up text to him about his dependence?
On March 12th, which would have been the next day when I let him know the rates, I just sent him a text message that said, all right, for a household of 3, this is what your rates are going to look like. This is what the insurance situation is.
Did you have any reason for sending that besides just letting him know what the rate would be?
Just to one final time make sure that there was no one else in the household we needed to count.
And what was his response?
He said, sounds good. That's great.
Now, going back to the life insurance, do you normally, is it one of your roles in the office to work with Tammy's employer relative to the life insurance planning?
Yes.
And what role do you play in that?
For her school district, I had done the presentation of the open enrollment presentation explaining the benefits, and I gave her life insurance election form. That was the extent.
What do you explain in that open enrollment process?
Just what the benefits look like for the upcoming contract year, health, life, disability, and we show them how to calculate how much life insurance they can elect voluntarily.
Excuse me. At any point in time when Chad had come into the office, did you ever notice anything that he was wearing?
Microphone, please.
Leading?
Overall.
Yes.
What did you notice?
When he was in my office on November 21st and inquired to me about if he were to get married again, my eye was drawn to his wedding finger, and I noticed he was wearing a ring, and I wondered if that was his ring from Tammy or if it was an engagement ring for the new wife.
Did you notice the color of the ring?
These people are idiots.
Yes.
What was the color?
Turquoise.
Did you happen to observe or notice what type of ring it was?
It just looked like a turquoise wedding ring.
Okay. Later on, at any point in time, did you ever observe him to be wearing any other type of ring?
Yes, when he was in my office on March 11th, first of all, he looked thinner and tanner. He looked quite happy, but his ring was black. It was different. And so my mind thought,
black,
okay,
like
the turquoise one must have been
souls.
from his marriage to Tammy, and this is his new one.
Your Honor, I don't have any more questions at this time.
All right, thank you. All right, cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
This is our last
Yes.
witness.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ballard. You had an occasion to be interviewed by Officer Mattingly, is that correct?
Yes.
And in reading that interview, I noted that you mentioned that one of the first times Chad approached you about insurance, he was referencing insurance for Seth, Leah, Mark, and just Chad. Is that correct?
Who's
Yes.
Leah?
And that was on the 31st of October?
Yes.
Okay. And then it wasn't your unusual practice, but you helped the family with the Medicaid for Seth and Leah, if I remember. Is that correct?
Yes.
Seth's wife?
So the initial request for insurance was just for his children that weren't covered, correct?
Yes, the whole family was losing coverage that day because it was through Tammy previously.
Okay, through the employment, correct?
Correct, yes.
So the death of Tammy would cause a loss of coverage for the entire family, correct?
Yes.
Now, on the issue of the enrollment period, in regards to the school district, you mentioned that you went to the school and you put on a presentation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at that point, it was the teachers that were there and the librarian, and that you were presenting just to them. You weren't presenting to the entire family. Is that right?
Right.
So at that point, if they were eligible, it would be the teacher's decision whether they would elect to increase or decrease their insurance, correct?
We give them a deadline of when the forms have to come back. It's very common for people to take those
Is
home and
Seth
discuss them with
married?
their family.
Okay, good.
Pomegranate?
And the enrollment period for the Sugar School District would have been when in September?
I think the forms were due back September 15th, and they would have been effective September 1.
And do you recall
at Chud.
when you gave the presentation in September?
I gave it in August. It was August 23rd, 2019.
August 23rd?
That's what she said.
That's my memory.
Now, were you aware of the fact that Daybell family had other insurance other than the insurance they were getting through Tammy?
As far, no.
No Primera, you weren't aware of the Primerica policy that Tammy and Chad had prior to the school district insurance?
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying.
Overruled.
Counsel's testifying
And
again.
the base insurance for a first-year teacher is set at what with the school district?
I have no idea.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the cost is per unit of insurance to go up to the 80,000?
I can't think of the rate, but it goes 5 times your salary. So what she had elected ended up being 80,000.
And that's relatively inexpensive insurance, would you agree?
Yes.
So it wouldn't be unusual if it's manageable to try to seek the maximum amount of insurance.
Agreed.
Okay. Was there any discussion about
I'm looking it up right now. 5 kids.
other insurance options on Lori Vallow's other children?
I thought Emma was
No.
the only daughter, though.
Was there ever any discussion that Lori Vallow's children were living somewhere else in the country?
Lori Vallow's children never came up.
And in any regard whatsoever?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pryor. Any redirect, Mr. Wixom?
Can I have just one moment, Your Honor?
You may.
I think that was their only girl, Emma. There's nothing for tomorrow. Okay. Thank you, Shell, for checking. There's so much going on. The
You know, at this
Delphi
time, we have no
case-
redirect.
Delphi case
that'll
is getting
conclude the
crazy.
testimony then of Ms. Ballard. Is there any intention to recall
All
her
right,
from the
that
state?
wraps up day 14. We are done with day 14. But I did want to update you guys that the Delphi case, the freaking judge in that case is being a total bitch, and it's becoming a huge mess. So Fran Siegel, the judge for Richard Allen, is she's against the defense completely. It does, Teresa. It does. It's against the defense completely. She just is shutting them down at every mark. So I think today she came out and called them incompetent again or something. It's getting nuts. It's weird seeing all the corruption that we see, and then we had Koberger earlier. So tomorrow we're live at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. True crime and news updates for you guys. I will see you then. And you know what? We can still make those goals tomorrow. Maybe we'll do a coffee live. Maybe I'll surprise with a coffee live in the morning. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. See how it goes. Yeah, maybe we can talk about Suzanne. Just, get updated on some case updates that we've, didn't really warrant a whole video or a whole live to talk about. And we can update on those as well. Good idea. All right, we'll see how it goes. At any rate, we are live every Monday and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Members of this channel have access to our Discord. Please join us over in Discord every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. we have a watch party. So it's lots of fun. Get to know everybody in this community a little bit better. Let's roll our credits. Thank you for watching Daybell, Days 13 and 14. Everybody stay safe and say good night to the play button. I love you guys. Thank you for your support. See you tomorrow.
I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I'm sexy and I know it. I work out.
So there's a lot of butt joints.
Oh my God. God forbid. God forbid.
You wanna be with me. You wanna feel the real.
Everybody does that. It's okay.
You're making plans to get to France, but don't wanna face
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name.
I ain't got time for that. Staying up late, sleeping all day.
I'm gonna get drunk and ride my horse.
By the pool, sipping on Coke and Jack. Calling my phone when you feel alone, but I'll never call you.
Jennifer loves horses.
I want one Jennifer or two Jennifers.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Bye, Jennifer.